Chapter 926. Yes. Zhang Peng accepted the order and put away the things. Hong Qi, who was at the side, looked at the Immortal Ascension pill in his master's hand with envy. He smiled apologetically and said, "Master, don't let the goodies flow to outsiders. When will we be able to raise our cultivation again?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at him. He also wanted everyone's cultivation to reach the heavens in a single step, but it was easy to forcibly increase cultivation, but it was troublesome to forge an immortal body. It was fine if there were only a few people, but if there were too many it would be troublesome. It would definitely attract the attention of the Immortal Palace. Moreover, the Immortal Palace controlled the 72 worlds' Immortal Ascension passages. It would be difficult to avoid them. "What's the hurry?" Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. "There is something you need to pay attention to when you get out. Use the connections of Hong Gang and Qing Gang to find out who can make pills in the entire cultivation world. And those cultivators scattered around the cultivation world, as long as they can make pills, record their whereabouts. When I need them, you must make sure that you can find them at any time." Hong Qi was stunned. He scratched his face in confusion. "Master, do you want them to help you make pills? Just do as I say." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and sent him back to Hong Gang. He then opened his palm and looked at the Immortal Ascension pill in his hand. He muttered to himself, "There are many big sects in the immortal world. Each of them is strong and well-trained. Although I am not as good as them, I have more people. I have millions of cultivators in the human world. Which sect in the immortal world dares to say that they have more people than me? Who says that they can't compete with you?" Now that all the spirit-severing cultivators in the cultivation world were under his command, the entire human world was his territory. There was no other reason why he asked Hong Qi to count the number of people who could make pills in the cultivation world. Because although the number of people in the cultivation world was huge, to bring them to the immortal world to join in the fun, their cultivation was too low. Therefore he needed a lot of limit-breaking pills and marrow-cleansing pills. But how many people would they need for 1,000,000? Just one tribulation passing stage cultivator required 5 restriction-breaking pills, 1 marrow-cleansing pill and 1 immortal ascension pill. In the cultivation world, there were countless foundation establishment and nascent soul cultivators. He needed at least 8 million restriction-breaking pills, and at least 1 million marrow-cleansing pills and immortal ascension pills. With such a large number of pills, if Qin Feng and the others were to refine them, it would probably take several years even if they worked day and night. Therefore he needed all the alchemy cultivators in the entire cultivation world to work for him. With his current power in the cultivation world, this was not a problem at all. The only thing that worried him the most was how he should find a way to help these people smoothly obtain their immortal physiques. "Zhang Peng, tell your master's wife to stop doing other things and plant the immortal herbs used to refine these 3 immortal pills. The planting ratio of Great Restriction Breaking Pill, Marrow Cleansing Pill and Immortal Ascension Pill is 8:1, Yu Qianzhou said lightly. "Plant them without limit?" Zhang Peng was shocked. He did not know why his master wanted such a large number. After a pause he still accepted the order and said, "Yes." When he raised his head again, his master was no longer in front of him. In a remote area of Utopia, on a large snowy mountain where few people went, Yu Qianzhou looked at the purple chaos not far away. It was vast and mighty, connecting the heavens and the earth. As his cultivation level increased, the territory of Utopia also became wider. Mountains and rivers appeared one after another, and he did not expect that even the snowy mountain would appear. "As long as my cultivation level can continue to increase, it seems that this place will become an independent world sooner or later. I just don't know how big it will be in the end." Yu Qianzhou looked at the purple chaos in the distance and muttered to himself. He opened his palm and the fragrant Immortal Ascension pill was swallowed by him without hesitation. Then he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to circulate the medicinal power. Under the corrosion of the Immortal Ascension pill in his stomach, some golden liquid gradually appeared on its surface. Traces of energy started to seep out and spread to his limbs and bones. As the liquid increased, the energy started to be released in waves, and it became more and more intense as it surged into his meridians. At first, this energy could still flow smoothly under the control of Yu Qianzhou's quintessential essence. However, as the speed at which the Immortal Ascension pill melted increased, the released energy started to flood his meridians like raging waves. It was violent and violent, causing Yu Qianzhou's heart to palpitate. The golden fog-like energy increased until it filled all the meridians in his limbs and bones. It even surged directly into his dantian. Increase. 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 As the energy overloaded his body, Yu Qianqiu felt swollen. His entire body was swollen and painful, and his skin felt like it was about to split open. At that moment he was no longer in the mood to control the energy in his body. He raised his cultivation level to the limit and tried his best to protect his swollen body. Damn it! It was too painful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have played with it. If this went on, he would definitely explode. Yu Qianqiu was immersed in endless pain and suffering. This feeling was too uncomfortable. Once it started, there was no way to get rid of it. He couldn't avoid it even if he wanted to. He felt like his body was about to explode and he really couldn't hold on any longer. He didn't know that his current appearance was the same as the subordinate he had seen before. His entire body was covered with cracks and blood had already dyed his entire body. His entire body was swollen like a ball and he didn't look like a human anymore. Just as he was about to give up, the 10 small people in his dantian, who were sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed, were finally forced open by the pressure of the golden fog and entered his body. The 10 small people trembled and opened their eyes at the same time. Their clear eyes looked at each other, and they seemed to know that their original bodies were in danger. So they opened their mouths and noses and breathed in the quintessential essence mixed with the golden fog. They began to speed up the refinement process. The golden fog was like a medicine that could assimilate the quintessential essence. The 10 small people breathed in the golden white fog, but what they breathed out was a wisp of golden light. They breathed in big mouthfuls, but what they breathed out was only a thin wisp. As the 10 small people worked hard to refine the golden fog, Yu Qianqiu, who felt like he couldn't hold on any longer, finally persevered. Moreover, as time passed, he felt that his skin, which was about to burst open, was showing signs of shrinking. In fact, he was like a balloon that had been inflated and was gradually shrinking, but the speed was a little slow. After an unknown amount of time, when Yu Qianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief and began to examine his body with his divine sense, he immediately discovered the actions of the 10 small people in his body. The wisps of golden light that they breathed out seemed to have a mind of their own. As soon as they were spat out, they swam out of his dantian like living fish and began to wander around his meridians, as if they were observing this new world. Immortal essence. Yu Qianqiu's body shook. With a glance he could guess that the golden wisps were immortal essence. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. There was finally hope for his cultivation to reach the immortal realm. Subconsciously he wanted to control them, but they were too small and not very obedient. They were as slippery as loaches, very hard to control. The 10 small people continuously breathed in and out, and as time passed the number of golden wisps increased, scurrying around his meridians. Once they met, they would happily fuse together. When they formed a small golden cloud, they could no longer escape Yu Qianqiu's control. Yu Qianqiu controlled the golden cloud to sweep through all the meridians in his body, taking in stray strands and merging them into a large golden cloud. After that, he began to clear and expel the remaining true essence and golden mist from his body into his dantian for the 10 small people to absorb and refine. When the last golden and white mist was absorbed, refined and spat out, the 10 small people seemed to have gained a great understanding. Each of them solemnly closed their eyes, and the circle formed by the 10 people began to spin faster and faster. In the end, it was so fast that even Yu Qianqiu himself couldn't see it clearly. A huge suction force began to emerge from his dantian, sucking all the golden immortal essence in Yu Qianqiu's body into his dantian, stirring up a golden hurricane in his dantian. Even if Yu Qianqiu wanted to use his divine sense to explore it, it would be difficult. Suddenly, a huge momentum exploded in his dantian like a nuclear weapon. Yu Qianqiu's body shook, and from the inside out, a golden mist suddenly burst out of his body, washing away all the blood scabs on his body. How could Yu Qianqiu allow the celestial core power that he had painstakingly refined to dissipate? He immediately extended his divine sense outwards and opened his mouth and nose. Like a whale drawing water, he sucked in the golden mist that lingered around his body. The golden cloud, which was originally intertwined with steel wires, was blown to pieces. After it was reorganized, it flowed back into Yu Qianqiu's body. His body, which was covered with bruises, was like a good rain after a long drought. It felt cool and refreshing to his limbs and bones. Oh! Yu Qianqiu let out an incomparably comfortable moan. He found that the effects of the explosion were quite good. The immortal elemental energy didn't have its own consciousness like before. At this moment his consciousness was the immortal elemental energy's consciousness. It was completely under his control. When he controlled the immortal essence to nourish his meridians and circulate it to his dantian, Yu Qianqiu realized that the 10 little people in his dantian had become 9. After the explosion, the 7 souls had merged with his life soul. The 7 souls had begun to return to his life soul, which meant that his cultivation had entered another level, reaching the early stage of minor immortal. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened and he suddenly stood up with his arms facing the sky. He laughed out loud excitedly. However, before he could laugh for a while, his laughter stopped abruptly. He saw that the purple chaos not far from the Great Snow Mountain had disappeared without a trace. Looking from the Great Snow Mountain, the foot of the mountain where the snow had melted was connected to a large area of wilderness. As he looked further, he saw a beach. At the edge of the beach, white waves surged, crashing against the shore, and a vast ocean surged. The ocean actually appeared. Yu Qianqiu did not expect to see such a scene the moment he opened his eyes. He immediately let out a long howl toward the sky in excitement, echoing the surging ocean in the distance. Chapter 927. The blazing sun, the blue sky, the snowy mountains, the sea. Yu Qianqiu stood at the top of the snowy mountain. He was excited, but he couldn't help but feel a little proud. This was his world, a world that completely belonged to him. He stood on the mountain and looked at the sky and the ground for a long time. After a long time he slowly withdrew his thoughts. Suddenly his gaze froze. He found that he was the same as his previous subordinate. He was completely naked on the mountain. Needless to say, this was the result of his cultivation breaking through to the early stage of small immortal. Yu Qianqiu looked around guiltily. Fortunately, there was no one else here. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He then stretched out his palm. A water dragon surged out from his palm, winding from top to bottom. It wrapped around his body and swam quickly. The increase in his cultivation made it easier for him to control the water flow. His whole body was sparkling. In his excitement, he waved his arm and pointed to the sky. The water dragon wrapped around him, wriggled into the sky and danced in the air above the snowy mountain. The water dragon was transparent, but its horns were distinct and lifelike. Its appearance was exactly the same as the majestic red dragon that Yu Qianqiu had seen under the blue fire. After controlling it to his heart's content, he still couldn't vent his passion. He waved his arm again and a yellow earth dragon flew out from his arm. It flew into the sky and played with the water dragon. Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised to find that it was easy to control the earth and water magic at the same time. It was not difficult at all. Thus he waved his arm and pointed it at the sky again, and a dazzling golden dragon emerged from his arm and flew into the sky, joining the water and earth dragons in their chase. Immediately, a spectacle of 3 dragons dancing together appeared in the sky above the snow-capped mountain. Go! Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky and shouted. A green fireball shot out from his palm and bounced into the sky. 3 vivid dragons of different colors immediately chased after the green fireball. The 3 dragons playing with fire pearl, they fought each other. This was the first time he used 4 magic arts at the same time since he started cultivating the water, fire, metal and earth magic arts. He had tried it in the past, but he could only control 2 magic arts at the same time. Unexpectedly, after his cultivation base had reached the early stage minor immortal stage, it would be so easy for him to control 4 magic arts at the same time. Since that's the case, let's go again. Go! Yu Qianqiu excitedly waved his right hand again and slapped the air. A black fireball shot into the sky. The water dragon of the 3 dragons playing with a pearl immediately shook its head and wagged its tail as it chased after it. As soon as the black flame appeared, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that it was difficult to control it. After all, he was controlling 4 types of magic arts at the same time. However, his left hand still shot out a purple fireball. However, the moment the purple flames rose into the sky, the entire utopia seemed to tremble slightly. There seemed to be a faint purple light flashing in the sky. Although it only appeared for the blink of an eye, Yu Qianqiu saw it clearly. He could not help but look at the purple fireball that was burning in the sky. He had a strange feeling in his heart. This ball of purple flame seemed to be a fire seed, and when it appeared, it seemed to have ignited something in Utopia. the sound of waves crashing against the shore suddenly rang out. Yu Qianzhou looked over and saw that the sea in the distance had suddenly surged with raging waves. It looked abnormally uneasy. In the sky above the sea, the sky gradually darkened and dark clouds brewed. Moreover, the clouds seemed to be getting thicker and thicker. After a while, one could hear the faint sound of thunder coming from within. Could it be? Yu Qianzhou's gaze stopped on the purple flame in the sky again. He was almost connected to the entire utopia, so he naturally sensed that something abnormal was happening in utopia. He could clearly sense that the abnormal activity in utopia had something to do with the purple flames that he had released. Purple flames are the energy that maintains the operation of a world. Almost every world has it. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flickered as he muttered softly. Then he waved his arms and summoned the 3 types of flames in the sky. The 3 wyverns also flew over and circled around him. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into his body. After the purple flames disappeared, the rumbling and rolling dark clouds above the sea immediately lost their momentum and slowly shrank back to their original positions. From this, Yu Qianzhou was even more certain of his guess. His shoulders trembled slightly, and a ball of purple flames suddenly burst out from his body, enveloping his entire body. The wind could not disperse it. In an instant, the sound of thunder rang out again. Yu Qianzhou stared at the sea with a burning gaze. The dark clouds that had just retreated immediately churned again. They spewed out like ink, and the sound of thunder rumbled as they pushed forward. Not long after, they arrived above his head. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged and the weather changed. The snow on the mountain peak was blown everywhere, and bolts of lightning were faintly visible in the dark clouds. The energy that maintains the operation of a world. If I can control it well, I believe the might of the world can be used by me. A faint smile appeared on Yu Qianzhou's face. He finally felt the connection between the dark clouds and the purple flames. Then he slowly closed his eyes and silently felt the subtle changes between the purple flames and the dark clouds above his head. Just like that, he stood there with his eyes closed for an entire day. Lightning flashed across the dark clouds above his head, and his body was covered in purple flames. When he suddenly opened his eyes, he stretched out a finger and brazenly pointed at a ridge halfway up the mountain. In that instant, there was a loud bang in the air, and a bolt of lightning rapidly struck down from the dark clouds, directly hitting the ridge. Boom! Earth and rocks exploded, and the ridge that was covered in pure white snow disappeared in the blink of an eye. Only a large piece of pitch-black land was left, and the slightly burnt green smoke was swept away by the mountain wind. The speed of lightning is close to teleportation. If it is used to attack. Haha. I didn't think the purple flames could be used in this way. As expected, if you use it well, you will be invincible under the heavens. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but laugh wildly. He had never thought that the purple flames could be used in this way. Again. A fierce look appeared on Yu Qianzhou's face. He stretched out both his palms, and the purple flames that covered his body quickly flowed into his palms, forming a deep purple fireball in each of his palms. He clenched his 5 fingers and with a yes sound he suddenly opened his arms. Rumble. The dark clouds in the sky began to churn rapidly, and the wind in the mountain also began to howl mournfully. The wind swirled and danced in the air, gradually condensing into numerous wind blades that were almost tangible. They densely covered the entire sky, and danced chaotically like flying darts with xiao-xiao sounds. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou's gaze suddenly shot towards another ridge, and in an instant, the densely packed wind blades shot out in a frenzy. Bang bang bang. A series of explosions rang out incessantly. After a short while, the remaining wind blades collapsed and disintegrated, turning into a gale that swept away the dense dust and smoke. The mountain ridge that was more than 10 meters high suddenly disappeared. It had been disintegrated by the wind blades, leaving only densely packed deep marks where it had been. There's more. Yu Qianzhou clenched both his fists and following his explosive shout, rumble. The thick dark clouds above his head immediately responded violently. The electric snakes shuttling through the clouds quickly intertwined into a thunderbolt, and with a loud bang, another ridge was blasted into pieces. Soon after, a second, a third, a fourth. For a moment, thunder and lightning intertwined, and the thunderbolts were as dense as a curtain of rain, winding and dazzling. The sky and earth were flashing, and it was almost impossible to see the surrounding scenery clearly. Countless thunderbolts crazily struck the surroundings of the snowy mountain, and the sky and earth changed color. The explosions were deafening, and in the blink of an eye, mountain ridges were razed to the ground. Only when the snowy mountain under his feet began to sway, did Xianxia, who was standing alone in the crisscrossing light and shadow, put down his arms, and the countless thunderbolts immediately disappeared. Xianxia looked around, and only then did he realize that within a few miles, with the main peak as the center, all the small mountains had been destroyed by the thunderbolts, and the ground was full of potholes caused by the thunderbolts. The main peak under his feet had become a lonely peak that stood tall and straight, but it was also filled with cracks of different width and could collapse at any time. The thunderbolts that filled the sky left behind a reverberating sound, and the thunderbolts in the dark clouds above his head also disappeared. In an instant the entire world returned to silence. The purple flame gradually disappeared from his palm, and Xianxia looked around and sneered, "Wind, fire, thunder and lightning, the power of heaven and earth, all for my use, hee. If there's a chance I'll find some blind fools to test their power." His whole body felt like it was being torn apart, and he let out a cold breath. When he looked down, he was immediately shocked. He saw that the surface of his skin had burst open and blood was flowing out, and he could see the fresh flesh and blood vessels under his skin. In short, his whole body had been severely damaged. "Oh no, I've overdone it." Xianxia smiled bitterly. When he felt the pain earlier, he thought he could endure it, but he didn't expect to be injured to this extent. Obviously, because his body wasn't tough enough, he used his immortal level cultivation to forcibly exert great power, and as a result his body was damaged. It was good that his body didn't explode. "I'll recover first, then I'll go back to the immortal world and use the immortal passage to forge an immortal body." Xianxia sighed helplessly and sat down cross-legged. He looked up at the dark clouds in the sky, and just as he was about to make them disappear, he suddenly froze and looked at the dark clouds in the sky in a daze. He suddenly felt that the scene of summoning the lightning was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. In a flash, he recalled the process of summoning lightning in the Eastern Holy Land to refine his body and forge an immortal body. Xianxia, who came back to his senses, looked at his body that was covered with cuts and bruises. After a moment of hesitation, a ruthless expression flashed across his face, and he gritted his teeth. He spread out his palms, and the two purple flames were pinched in his palms again. Rumble! The dark clouds in the sky rolled again, and thunder rumbled. Electric snakes also shuttled back and forth. Suddenly, a small electric snake flashed and struck Xianxia's body. On the spot, his hair exploded and his whole body was charred black. He fell to the ground and cursed, "Motherf asterisk cur." He shook his head and sat up again. Chapter 928. Xianxia was speechless as he looked at the dark clouds filled with electric snakes. He had been so stupid just now and let the lightning strike him without any resistance. Although he was a little afraid and only got a small bolt of lightning to strike him, it was still enough to make him feel like he had fainted. Now that he thought about it, he realized that he was really stupid. How can I use the power of lightning to forge an immortal body? Xianxia frowned and muttered to himself. He recalled the process of Bai Changchun forging an immortal body in the Eastern Holy Land. The scene of the golden arcs communicating with the power of heaven and earth had shocked him, an immortal crocodile. It was still fresh in his memory. After pondering for a while, Xianxia could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He admitted that he could not figure out Bai Changchun's mysterious method. Even if he could, it would certainly not be something that could be done in a short time. After thinking about it, he gave up on imitating it. Damn it! I'll naturally get the feeling after a few more strikes. Xianxia looked at the dark clouds in the sky and made up his mind. However, he would not leave his defenses like last time. The celestial essence in his body quickly circulated to cover his whole body for defense. Rumble! An electric snake shot over and hit Xianxia directly. He felt his whole body go numb and his mind recovered from the temporary blankness. But this time it was obviously better than last time. In addition, he could control the power of the lightning, so he did not get struck and curse again. After getting used to it once or twice, Xianxia immediately became bolder. Small thunderbolts were continuously injected into his body, and the subtle changes that occurred in his body were immediately captured by him. After his cultivation reached the immortal realm, the speed at which celestial essence repaired his damaged body was obviously much faster than that of spiritual essence. The most amazing thing was that the combination of the lightning and celestial essence seemed to produce a chemical effect. The damaged body that was repaired was obviously many times tougher than the original body. So that's how it is. It's not complicated at all. I've been worried for nothing. Understanding the mystery behind it, a thin bolt of lightning immediately struck down from the dark clouds. The strange thing was that this thunderbolt was like a rope thrown out from the dark clouds. One end of it was tied to Xianxia, who was on the mountain peak, and the other end was tied to the dark clouds in the sky. The dazzling greenish-white thunderbolt rope kept twisting in the sky, connecting the sky and the earth. The buzzing sound of electric currents reverberated throughout the mountain peak. Streaks of electric currents formed a green halo that wrapped around Xianxia's body like a hoop. The expression on Xianxia's face was twisted. He gritted his teeth to stay awake and accept the tempering of the lightning. He was changing his body bit by bit. He didn't dare to rush the 5-blow thunderstruck. Several days later, the electric rope binding him disappeared and the dark clouds in the sky began to disperse. When the sky was clear again, Xianxia finally opened his eyes. A bright light flashed in his eyes. He, who was sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak, suddenly leaped up, opened his arms and let out a long howl towards the sky. After venting the excitement in his heart, Xianxia couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly when he recalled the process of Bai Changchun's body tempering. That was like being struck by a sky full of angry lightning. Perhaps only that perverted old man would dare to do that. If he was randomly struck by that kind of angry lightning, he definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. From this, it could be seen how big the difference in ability was between the two of them. In the basement of the World Commerce Association, Xianxia was lying naked in the bath. After soaking for a while, he got up and grabbed a set of clothes to wear. Then he walked unsteadily to the hall on the first floor. In the hall, a few lords of the Soul Formation stage were chatting in 2s and 3s. Most of the others were hiding in their rooms to cultivate. The door outside was deserted. At least Xianxia didn't see a single guest. When the 5 or 6 people in the hall saw him suddenly appear, they all saluted and said, "Sect Master." Xianxia nodded and asked knowingly, "How's business?" Someone didn't know whether to laugh or cry and replied, "It's still the same." Everyone's in good spirits. You guys continue. After Xianxia waved his hand to dismiss everyone, he was about to go upstairs when he saw Yunnan, who was wearing a white fur coat and had an elegant temperament, slowly walk in. When Yunnan saw Xianxia in the hall, he was slightly startled. However, he was used to Xianxia's unpredictability, so he immediately walked over and called out, "Sect Master. Is there any news from outside recently?" Xianxia asked. "There is some, but it's not good news," Yunnan said helplessly. Xianxia raised his eyebrows and said, "Tell me about it." "Sect Master, please restrain your grief." Yunnan sighed and cupped his hands. "Restrain my grief?" Xianxia was startled and didn't understand. He asked suspiciously, "What do you mean? Did something happen to someone here?" "It's not here." Yunnan waved his hand and explained, "Sect Master, you don't know this. It's said that your good friend Shui Mingqing from Chaotian Palace was killed in Chaotian Palace some time ago. The murderer hasn't been found yet." Xianxia was startled again. "I thought it was something serious. It turned out to be him. I killed Shui Mingqing. Why should I restrain my grief?" However, he still asked with grief and indignation on his face, "Is the news true?" It should be true. It spread all over the hallucinatory Immortal city. Chaotian Palace didn't come out to refute the rumor. "It must be true," Yunnan said. "And I'll go to Chaotian Palace's branch to verify it later." Xianxia suppressed the grief and asked, "You said there's bad news. What is it?" "That." Yunnan was a little embarrassed. He observed Xianxia's expression and said, "The great master of Passionless Palace, Zhang Yunxin, has come to Chaotian Immortal City's branch. It's said that he's here to keep an eye on you. As soon as you leave Chaotian Immortal City, he will." He left out the unlucky words. Xianxia wasn't a fool. He knew what the latter part was. He sneered, "What's there to hide? He just wants to kill me. If he has the ability, just do it." Then he asked, "What about the other news?" "Recently, everyone has been talking about the ranking meeting. Most of the sects are preparing for it. The other news is just gossip. It's messy and not worth mentioning," Yunnan said. Okay, you can go about your business. Yu Qianqiu nodded to show that he got it. Then he slowly walked upstairs. He planned to check on Bai Suzhen first and then go to Chaotian Palace's branch to express his condolences for Shui Mingqing's death. When he reached the 22nd floor, Yu Qianqiu walked lightly to Wei Chuanqiu, who was sitting cross-legged at the door with his eyes closed. He peeped through the crack of the door only to see white streamers moving inside. He couldn't see the situation inside at all. Where have you been these days? Wei Chuanqiu opened his eyes slowly and asked. Yu Qianqiu didn't answer his question. He pouted his mouth at the room and said, "Is she all right?" Wei Chuanqiu also didn't answer his question. He pouted his mouth at the room diagonally opposite and said, "Your subordinate one-armed old ghost kept asking for you. He disturbed the tranquility here. I asked him to face the wall and think about it." One-armed old ghost? Li Duxing? Why is he looking for me? Yu Qianqiu murmured. He turned around and opened the door diagonally opposite. He saw Li Duxing standing stiffly facing the wall. He didn't move even when he came in. What's the matter? Yu Qianqiu walked to him and asked. However, Li Duxing still didn't move. Yu Qianqiu then realized that Li Duxing must have been restrained by Wei Chuanqiu. Otherwise, with Li Duxing's character, how could he face the wall and think about it obediently? Just when he was about to ask Wei Chuanqiu to release Li Duxing's inhibition, a ray of light outside the door shot into Li Duxing's body. Li Duxing gave a slight muffled hum, then moved his body a little and slowly turned around. Obviously he had been trapped for a long time. I haven't seen Miss for a long time. What did you do to her? Li Duxing stared at him and asked with his eyes sparkling. Yu Qianqiu knew that the Miss he was talking about was Lu Yanqing. This guy was ranked behind Wen Lanfeng. He was Lu Yanqing's second patron saint, but he didn't stick to Lu Yanqing as much as Wen Lanfeng. Yu Qianqiu sighed. It's really hard to explain in a short time. Your Mrs. Brain is not normal. He immediately told him how he went to the wedding banquet with Lu Yanqing after Wen Lanfeng left, and how Lu Yanqing was stimulated by Wen Lanfeng's departure and refused to come back, so she stayed in the Elysium fairyland. Li Duxing was speechless after listening. Based on his understanding of Lu Yanqing, he knew that it was very likely that she would do such a thing. After a pause, he frowned and said to himself with a gloomy expression, "When Lanfeng is gone, don't worry. Your Miss has a good relationship with Wu Xiong's wife. She should be fine. Besides, I'm trying to get her back. By the way, come with me." Yu Qianqiu beckoned him and went out. Bat King Wei, have you given the thing I asked you to give to the great Minglun? Yu Qianqiu squatted beside Wei Chuanqiu and asked, with Li Duxing standing behind him. Li Duxing looked at Wei Chuanqiu with mixed feelings. Thinking of the scene where he was subdued by Wei Chuanqiu, it was a big blow to him. Wei Chuanqiu first glanced at Li Duxing, then replied, "I've asked the great Minglun to deliver the thing, but the girl has left Wu Xiong's mansion. You two don't need to worry. Girl is fine. I heard that because the girl played and sang well, Immortal Ji Wu took a fancy to her. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai personally asked Wu Xiong to send the girl to Immortal Ji Wu's residence." Wei Chuanqiu took out a jade archive and handed it to Yu Qianqiu, saying, "Before the thing was delivered to the girl, the great Minglun brought it back and returned it to you. He asked me to tell you that it's not convenient for him to meet Immortal Ji Wu at will. And since it's the Immortal Emperor who asked for the girl, there's no need to see her again. Unless the Immortal Emperor agrees, no one dares to let the girl leave the Elysium fairyland." Chapter 929. As soon as the jade archive fell into Yu Qianqiu's hand, Li Duxing snatched it and quickly injected his divine sense into it. But after reading it, he immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu with disdain and threw it back to Yu Qianqiu. It could be said that he had a deeper understanding of Yu Qianqiu's character. The contents of the jade archive were the words that Yu Qianqiu made up to trick Lu Yanqing to come back. The general meaning was that when Lanfeng came back with serious injuries and wanted to see Lu Yanqing again before he died, Li Duxing had to admit that such words really hit Lu Yanqing's soft spot. Based on Lu Yanqing's character, as long as she saw the contents of the jade archive, she would risk her life to come back. Then again, this also convinced Li Duxing that Yu Qianqiu did not lie to him. Lu Yanqing did not come back voluntarily. Wei Chuanqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, glanced at Yu Qianqiu and chuckled coldly. His character wasn't that great either, and he couldn't hold back for a moment. He had long since seen the contents inside. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them who were seated on one side and standing on the other and laughed awkwardly. He had crushed the jade archive in his hand. It could be considered as a last-ditch effort to erase the evidence. Li Duxing, if there's nothing else, go back first. Yu Qianzhou laughed as if nothing had happened. Miss is in Paradise Wonderland. Li Duxing frowned and muttered. Yu Qianzhou was startled. He stared at him with a serious face and warned, Li Duxing, you'd better not act recklessly. Paradise Wonderland is not a place you can trespass. The top masters of the immortal world gather there. With your current cultivation, going there is no different from seeking death. Besides, even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for the World Chamber of Commerce. Don't mess with the Immortal Palace and bring trouble to everyone. Don't worry, I will get Lu Yanqing back when I have the chance. I know what I'm capable of. Li Duxing shook his head to show that he knew what to do. After hesitating for a while, he frowned and asked, You, Headmaster, do you know where Wen Lanfeng went for cultivation? He didn't say that. Before he left, he only said that he had lost the ability to protect Lu Yanqing. He hoped to find back the ability to protect her. Yu Qianzhou paused for a moment, then sighed. I think he wants to find back his dignity even more. At the very least, he wanted to regain his dignity in front of Lu Yanqing. A man who was trapped by love. Why do you have to do this? Li Duxing fell into silence. After a long time, a resolute look flashed on his face. He slowly raised his head to look at Yu Qianzhou and said in cadence, My life was saved by Mississippi. Although Miss doesn't care about it, I once swore to Miss that as long as Miss needs me, I will do anything for you. A man should never go back on his words, but the situation here really makes me blush with shame. If Miss really needs me one day, I'm afraid I'll be powerless. What Wen Lanfeng did was right. What do you mean? Yu Qianzhou's pupils suddenly shrank. He had already guessed what he wanted to do. Li Duxing's eyes suddenly burst out of vigorous fighting spirit. He stared at Yu Qianzhou's eyes and said word by word, Among the people I have met in my life, the one I admire the most is your master. Although I almost died in his hands, I admit my defeat. My greatest wish in this life is to have the qualifications to fight with him again. I believe that he is still alive and perhaps I will have the chance to see him again. If I can fight with him again, I will die without regrets. Yu Qianzhou looked at him speechlessly. He found that there were always people who overestimated themselves in this world. They were not opponents of the same level at that time, and now the gap between them was like heaven and earth. If the old guy was still alive, you would die without regret if you provoked him again. There would not always be someone to save your life at the critical moment. Just say it. What do you want to say? Yu Qianzhou squinted his eyes and moved his fingers behind his back. Li Duxing immediately sensed a faint murderous intent from Yu Qianzhou, but he still said without fear, Wen Lanfeng can work hard, but I, Li Duxing, won't stop here. Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed with fierceness. He said, I know what you mean. You also want to learn from Wen Lanfeng and go out to practice alone. But you have to know that the wind and rain outside are treacherous. There's something I might as well tell you in advance. Before long, I'll be able to let everyone in the World Chamber of Commerce step into the immortal realm. This is a rare opportunity, don't miss it. There is a plum garden in the ghost village. In the cold winter, thousands of trees wither, but only the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Only by climbing the perilous peak can you see the wonderful scenery that others can't. People are born in hardships and die in peace. Li Duxing turned around resolutely and said while walking, Don't worry, leader Yu. No one can pry a word of the secret of World Chamber of Commerce out of my mouth. If you let me go today, I hope I can come back alive to repay you. He knew that he was no match for Yu Qianzhou. If Yu Qianzhou didn't let him go, he couldn't leave at all. Moreover, there was green-winged Bat King Wei Chuanqiu, who was at the early stage of Immortal Emperor beside Yu Qianzhou. He also knew that Yu Qianzhou was a cruel and merciless person. He was gambling. Yu Qianzhou looked ferociously at Li Duxing's back disappearing in the corridor. He clenched his fists behind his back, but for some reason he didn't do anything to him in the end. Wei Chuanqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up at some point. Looking at Li Duxing's disappearing back, he said thoughtfully, The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Only by climbing the perilous peak can you see the wonderful scenery that others can't. People are born in hardships and die in peace. This person has a high state of mind, and his talent in cultivation is also extraordinary. He may have a place in the immortal realm in the future, but the premise is that he can save his life outside. Damn it. You're all crazy and self-righteous. Be careful that no one will collect your corpse when you die outside. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted very unhappily. Fortunately, Wei Chuanqiu had set a soundproof bounded domain here, otherwise it would disturb Bai Suzhen's repair. To be honest, after getting along with these people for a long time, I always have a question. Where did you get these subordinates of yours in the Huashan realm? These people are definitely not like the disciples in the Huashan realm of ordinary sects, nor are they like the individual cultivators outside. Each of them has an extraordinary aptitude, and their talent in cultivation is also stronger than the other. They are all rare seedlings. If they can be given some time and opportunities, their achievements in the future should not be too bad. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot and said, "It's none of your business." Wei Chuanqiu snorted and said, "I saw that you wanted to kill him just now. Why did you let him go? Am I that kind of person who kills innocent people?" Yu Qianqiu said angrily. Wei Chuanqiu said noncommittally. Then he asked curiously, "Who on earth is your master? From what he said just now, it seems that your master is not simple. Anyway, he is better than you." Yu Qianqiu's words were sarcastic. Obviously he was in a bad mood. There were only a few top masters in the human world, but the two most powerful ones had left him. Wei Chuanqiu snorted coldly. He didn't take Yu Qianqiu's words seriously. He had weighed Li Duxing's cultivation and it was really not worth mentioning. However, Li Duxing could escape from the hands of Master Yu Qianqiu. Then it could be imagined that Master Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was high. Hearing his disdainful sneer, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him. He didn't bother to explain anything to him and there was no need to use Bai Chongqun to show off. After all, he didn't know whether Bai Chongqun was dead or alive. Thus he swung his sleeves and left. Wei Chuanqiu shouted behind him, "You'd better pay attention to the things that Bai Suzhen needs for cultivation." "Got it." Yu Qianqiu replied, went directly to a room on the 22nd floor, opened the window and flew out. He originally wanted to express his condolences to Shui Mingqing's death at the branch of Chaotian Palace in the hallucinatory Immortal City. Unexpectedly, as soon as he flew out of the territory of the World Chamber of Commerce, he found that he was targeted. Looking back, he saw 3 people in blue following him. Judging from their clothes, they were from the Heartless Palace. It seemed that Yu Nanshan's information was right. Songyun Exen really targeted him and wanted to avenge his grandson. Yu Qianqiu sneered. He thought that the people of the Heartless Palace dared not attack him in the hallucinatory Immortal City, so he let them follow him. After landing outside the gate of the Chaotian Palace, he looked around. The 3 people in blue were floating in a triangle above the branch of the Chaotian Palace. It was clear that they didn't want to give him any chance to slip away. Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to them and strode into the branch of the Chaotian Palace. As soon as he entered, someone immediately went to inform the elder in charge of the Chaotian Palace. Yadonglu stood at the door of the back hall with a smile on his face and welcomed him in. After both sides sat down, Yadonglu asked with a smile, "Welcome, sect leader Yu. What can I do for you?" Yu Qianqiu asked with a dignified expression, "I heard that Shui Mingqing was killed in the Chaotian Palace. Is this true?" Yadonglu's expression froze. This matter had caused quite a stir in the Chaotian Palace. Although it was a small disciple who died, the serious thing was that someone had secretly killed someone in the Chaotian Palace without anyone knowing. What was even more frightening was that they did not know whether the murderer was an insider of Skyward Palace or an outsider who had sneaked in to do it. However, Shui Mingqing's master, Master Yifuzi, insisted that it was his own people who had done it. He first targeted several of his opponents in the sect. In fact, many people in the Chaotian Palace thought the same, because there was really no need for outsiders to sneak in and kill a small disciple like Shui Mingqing. However, because the ranking contest was imminent, this matter was temporarily suppressed by the Chaotian Palace leader. However, after this matter spread to the outside world, there were various versions. Because Shui Mingqing was somewhat famous outside, it became a moderate scandal in the Palace of Heaven. Many people suspected that it was the result of internal strife in the Palace of Heaven. It seems to be true. After a moment of regret, Yu Qianqiu said with an angry expression, "Brother Shui has always been modest and has never offended anyone. I didn't expect someone to kill him. Don't let me know who did it or I won't forgive him." Yadonglu forced a smile and said, "It seems that the relationship between sect leader Yu and Shui Mingqing is not shallow. However, this is our own matter and we will solve it ourselves. We don't need outsiders to intervene." Yu Qianqiu said with an unfriendly expression. Oh, don't misunderstand. I don't want to intervene in the affairs of your Chaotian palace, but I have no choice. Everyone knows that I have a good relationship with Shui Mingqing, so it's a bit unreasonable not to say anything. I'm just going through the motions and I'll leave after a while. Did sect leader you come here for this matter? Yadonglu changed the topic indifferently. I heard that the Heartless Palace's high priest, Songyun Exen, has personally taken charge of the fantasy Immortal City. There is news that he is here for you. Sect leader you need to prepare early. The two of them suddenly didn't see eye to eye. After a while Yu Qianqiu said goodbye. After leaving the Chaotian Palace branch, he glanced at the sky and found that the three people were still guarding in the air. He immediately turned into a stream of light and rushed out of the fantasy Immortal City. Turning into a stream of light, Immortal stage cultivation? The three people were stunned and looked at each other, thinking that they had seen wrong. However, the three of them clearly saw that the person who left was indeed Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 930. Follow him, don't let him escape. Two streams of light immediately chased after Yu Qianqiu while the other person quickly took out a jade talisman and crushed it. Soon, a stream of light shot out from the Passionless Palace branch and chased after Yu Qianqiu. This person was none other than Songyun Exen, who had been waiting in the hallucination Immortal City for a long time. Suddenly someone said in surprise, "It's World Commerce's sect leader Yu Qianqiu. His cultivation base has broken through to Immortal level?" Soon, another two streams of light flashed before everyone's eyes. Someone clicked his tongue and said, "It's Passionless Palace's people chasing after Yu Qianqiu. This Passionless Palace is really capable. They actually forced Yu Qianqiu the coward out of the hallucination Immortal City." Streams of light appeared and looked. Soon another stream of light flashed like a star arrow. Many people cried out, "It's Songyun Exen." Yu Qianqiu was forced out of the hallucination Immortal City. Songyun Exen personally chased after him. Is it going to be a show? Not necessarily. I heard that Songyun Exen couldn't kill Yu Qianqiu in the blissful Immortal realm. I'm afraid Songyun Exen was worried about the Immortal Palace and couldn't make a move under their watch. That's why Yu Qianqiu was lucky enough to escape. They're all going to watch the show. Come, let's go take a look too. The people floating in the air turned into streams of light and chased after them like a meteor shower. On the top floor of the World Commerce, Yun Peng's eyes suddenly became as sharp as an eagle's. He stared at the people flocking in the distance. However, the distance was too far. He didn't see that Yu Qianqiu was being chased, so he just looked and didn't take it to heart. In the Skyward Palace branch, a disciple quickly ran into the inner hall and reported to the Yadonglu with cupped fists. Reporting to Elder, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce's sect leader was targeted by the Heartless Palace as soon as he left our place. At this moment he has already been chased out of illusory Immortal City by the people of Heartless Palace, and Heartless Palace's grand revered Songyun Exen has personally chased after him. What? Yadonglu, who was sitting calmly in the inner hall, suddenly turned around and said in shock, "Yu Qianqiu must have taken the wrong medicine. Of all places to run, they actually ran outside the illusory Immortal City. Wasn't this courting death? Oh right. Is there any movement from the World Chamber of Commerce?" This disciple specially observed for a while. Everything happened so suddenly and there was no movement from the World Commerce Association. It seems like they don't know that Yu Qianqiu is being pursued by the Heartless Palace. Strange. What method did the Heartless Palace use to actually force the coward Yu Qianqiu out of the illusory Immortal City? Yadonglu pondered for a while, then narrowed his eyes and laughed sinisterly. The Heartless Palace has been in the limelight these years. I want to see the scene of Cyan Wing Bat King and White Cloud Mountain Master joining hands to fight Songyun Exen. I wonder if Songyun Exen can block the two of them. The battle of three early-stage Immortal Emperor experts is really exciting. As soon as he finished speaking, Yadonglu turned into a stream of light and shot out of the inner hall directly towards the direction of the World Commerce Association. After flying above the World Commerce Association, Yadonglu immediately noticed that Yun Peng's eyes were locked on him. He flashed and landed beside Yun Peng. Before Yun Peng could do anything, he cupped his hands and exclaimed, "Senior Yun, it's bad. When Yu Qianqiu came out of my Heaven Palace branch, he was targeted by the Heartless Palace. Now he has been tricked out of the illusory Immortal City by the Heartless Palace's High Priest Songyun Exen is personally pursuing him. Yu Qianqiu is in danger. Please be prepared, Senior Yun. The cold and indifferent Yun Peng's eyes narrowed when he heard that. He had seen Yu Qianzhou leave earlier, and he had also seen Yu Qianzhou being targeted by the people of Heartless Palace. However, when he thought about how the people of Heartless Palace didn't dare to do anything to Yu Qianzhou within the illusionary Immortal City, he didn't take it to heart. How could he have known that Yu Qianzhou would be so stupid as to run out of the illusory Immortal City? A green shadow swept over and Wei Chuanqiu appeared. His small eyes emitted a faint green light as he stared at Yadonglu and shouted sternly, "Is what you said true?" Yadonglu had always wanted the world to be in chaos, so he deliberately raised his voice to let Wei Chuanqiu hear him. Now that he had succeeded, he couldn't help but be secretly delighted. He immediately cupped his hands and said with a solemn expression, "Senior Wei, I saw it with my own eyes. It can't be wrong." Wei Chuanqiu suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. He could still see streams of light gathering in one direction. They were actually people rushing to watch the show. He pointed and asked, "That direction?" Senior Wei is wise. It's that direction. Yadonglu's attitude was unprecedentedly polite and respectful. Wei Chuanqiu immediately looked at Yun Peng with a sinister expression and said, "There's no time to lose. You and I will go together and kill that Song guy." Yun Peng frowned and stared sharply at Yadonglu. He said in a deep voice, "The human heart is sinister. It's obvious that this person came with evil intentions. You guard here and be careful of someone taking advantage of the situation." After saying that, he turned into a white stream of light and flew at a speed faster than a meteor, creating waves in the air. He quickly flew in the direction that everyone was rushing to. Yadonglu was speechless by Yun Peng's words. He wanted to explain but found that Yun Peng had already left. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had long heard that White Cloud Mountain Master didn't have a good impression of humans, but he didn't expect his words to be so direct. He didn't even hold back and said that he came with evil intentions in front of him. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come personally. Wei Chuanqiu was currently in a very bad mood. In addition to Yun Peng's words, he immediately shouted at Yadonglu, "Scram!" Yadonglu was stunned and wanted to slap himself. He could only blame it on his bad luck and dejectedly left. He also flew in the direction that everyone was flying to watch the show. Wei Chuanqiu cast his gaze into the distance. At this moment, Bai Suzhen was quietly cultivating. Without anyone protecting her, it would be very dangerous for her. However, Yu Qianzhou was in control of his Naiden. If something were to happen, he would be in deep trouble. He calmed his mind and returned downstairs to continue protecting Bai Suzhen. Yu Qianzhou flew as fast as lightning out of the hallucinatory Immortal City. He looked back in the air and saw two streams of light quickly catching up. He immediately sneered and muttered, "Good, I'll use you two to test the waters." He immediately held two purple flames in his palms and sped through the air without looking back. At this time, a sudden gust of wind rose high up in the sky, but in the blink of an eye, there was a faint rumbling sound of thunder in the sky. For a time, the wind rose and the clouds surged and the sky gradually darkened. No one knew where the gray fog came from, but the world was filled with a gloomy haze. The two streams of light that were about to catch up with Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a huge resistance. Their speed immediately dropped. Their cultivation was clearly higher than Yu Qianzhou's, but at this moment the distance between them and Yu Qianzhou was getting bigger and bigger. The two looked at each other speechlessly with bewilderment in their eyes. They saw the gale in front of them like stormy waves pushing forward layer by layer. The wind was like a blade, so they had no choice but to protect themselves with their earth energy. They immediately heard the sound of knocking on their earth energy shields. What caused the two of them to be bewildered was that such a rare and powerful wind resistance seemed to have no effect on Yu Qianzhou, who was in front of them. That guy was still flying very nimbly as he frantically fled forward, widening the distance between him and the two of them. The gale became stronger and stronger, and the gray fog in the sky became darker and denser. Not long after, the dark sky was filled with crackling thunderbolts, and the rumbling sound of thunder and lightning could be heard everywhere. Yu Qianzhou was like a swift in the storm, happily shuttling through the crisscrossing thunder. After rushing to the center of the minefield in the sky, Yu Qianzhou immediately calmed down. He suddenly stopped flying and turned around to hover in the air. He coldly looked at the two people who were chasing after him. The gale suddenly weakened, and the two people immediately felt the strong wind pressure disappear. They immediately rushed over, but when they flew to the edge of the minefield they stopped at the same time. Looking at the unfathomable thick and thin zigzagging thunder under the dark clouds, the two people looked at each other. Thunder was not something to be trifled with. It was impossible to predict when it would strike here and there. Most importantly, the speed of thunder was too fast. It was not much inferior to teleportation and it was very difficult to dodge. A streak of light shot over and Grey Cloud Xian appeared between the two of them. He was also startled by the lightning bolts that filled the sky. He did not know how such a situation could occur. Such a dense amount of lightning bolts was simply unimaginable, giving off a feeling of the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of men. Songyun Xian, your heartless palace is chasing after me relentlessly. What is your intention? Yu Qianzhou asked despite knowing the answer. Songyun Xian's gaze quickly turned to the center of the minefield. He saw Yu Qianzhou standing there quietly. In the darkness, zigzagging and sinister lightning flashed in front of him, behind him and to his left and right. It was a very shocking scene. The crowd that came to watch the show also looked at each other when they saw this scene. A cold smile gradually appeared on Songyun Xian's face. This brat was obviously at the end of his rope. In order to escape, he actually took the risk to hide in the minefield. He immediately laughed wildly and said, Yu Qianzhou, when you killed Song Lianqing, you should have known that this day would come. Now that death is at hand, let's see where you can run to. With just a shameless old dog like you? Yu Qianzhou said with a disdainful expression, the world is so big. I can leave and stay as I please. This was proven when you chased after me in the Paradise Wonderland. What can you do to me? The crowd that was watching the show immediately burst into an uproar. They all sighed at this guy's audacity. He actually dared to speak to Songyun Xian like this. It seemed like he really knew that death was at hand and was ready to throw caution to the wind. Under the flickering lightning, Songyun Xian's expression was a little twisted. Yu Qianzhou's words had really hit his soft spot. That time he had let Yu Qianzhou escape right under his nose. He had always been deeply ashamed, and the last thing he wanted was to hear someone mention it to his face. He immediately ordered in a low voice, "Kill him." Chapter 931. The two people on the left and right looked at the lightning that was like the roots of a large tree and felt their scalps go numb. They didn't have the courage to ask Yu Qianzhou to be struck by lightning, so they couldn't help but be stunned. Yu Qianzhou, who was in the center of the lightning zone, laughed and said, as the saying goes, soldiers are all in one, generals are all in one. The great consecrator of Heartless Palace is afraid of death and actually wants his disciples to come out and die. You have really opened my eyes. Everyone's gazes immediately landed on Songyun Xian. Songyun Xian's countenance instantly turned ashen. The thunderbolts that filled the sky had indeed caused him to feel apprehensive. He had sent his two disciples to act as a safety measure. He wanted to see how powerful the thunderbolts were. If his two disciples could dodge and deal with it, then he could naturally deal with it as well. Kill him. Songyun Xian shouted angrily. He wanted to force his two disciples into the lightning zone to test the waters. Now that things had come to this, the two disciples had no way out. They looked at each other and gritted their teeth. Both of them took out their flying swords. Two rays of light cut through the dark space and rapidly attacked Yu Qianzhou, who was in the depths of the lightning zone. They had a good idea, hoping that long-range attacks could kill Yu Qianzhou. Of course, they also wanted to test the safety of using their flying swords. Unfortunately, as soon as the two rays of light entered the lightning zone, they immediately provoked the heavenly thunder. More than a dozen bolts of lightning mercilessly struck down. Two bolts of lightning immediately created two balls of sparks in the air. The two flying swords appeared, but the bodies of the swords were already scorched black. The strand of divine sense that was placed in the swords was also shattered by the heavenly thunder. They lost control and fell from the sky. The crowd that was watching the show gasped. If even the flying swords couldn't get past it, how could a human do it? But looking at Yu Qianzhou, who was in the center of the lightning zone, that guy was quite bold, but his luck was also quite good. Every time the furious lightning passed by him, it just couldn't hit him. It really was like seeing a ghost. The two Heartless Palace disciples looked at each other. With the flashes of lightning, they could see the sweat on each other's foreheads. Their faces were slightly pale. Could they break in? What was the difference between that and suicide? Grey Cloud Xian's expression was gloomy and gloomy. He could naturally tell that it was too dangerous to force his way in. It would be inexcusable to force his 2 disciples to go in. He was already cursing in his heart. This bastard's luck was really good. Of all places to hide, he just had to hide in this lightning zone. He immediately clenched his fists. The dark clouds in the sky immediately flashed with lightning and thunder, illuminating the sky and earth in a vast expanse of white. It seemed that Grey Cloud Xian's arrogant words had completely angered him. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. There seemed to be countless thunderous hands reaching out from the dark clouds and grabbing towards Songyun Xian. Immediately, someone said in astonishment, "Songyun Xian's words have offended the heavens." Grey Cloud Xian, who was rushing forward quickly, was instantly frightened. He immediately used all his cultivation to resist the heavenly tribulation. Now how could he still have the mood to chase after Yu Qianzhou? Bam 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 bam. Hundreds and thousands of explosions blasted on Grey Cloud Xian's aura shield. His whole body was as dazzling as if he was hiding in an incandescent light bulb, causing him to rapidly sink down from the sky. The dense thunderous explosions made everyone's ears go numb. However, Grey Cloud Xian was really not an ordinary kind of valiant. Under such a dense bombardment of thunderbolts, his aura shield could actually resist and not be shattered by the heavenly thunder. Faster, thief. Even this old pervert can't kill you? Yu Qianzhou looked up into the sky. In the dark clouds, the electric snakes from all directions shuttled and gathered, entangling into a super-large thunderbolt with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. It suddenly struck down as if it wanted to poke a big hole in the ground. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out as if space itself was about to be torn apart. The incomparably majestic energy pillar accurately bombarded the protective aura shield below, which was overflowing with golden light. Almost at the same time, an angry roar that was condensed from countless years of cultivation suddenly burst out, overshadowing the earth-shattering noise. Absolute heaven, absolute earth, absolute emotion, 3 swords as one sword-drawing style. A hysterical roar, an explosion of endless potential. Everything reverberated between heaven and earth in this one sentence. This was a roar that fought against death and fate. The golden aura shield suddenly shrank back into Grey Cloud Xian's body. Everyone's eyes were focused on it. Yun Peng's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle's eye, filled with disbelief. Just as the thunderbolt was about to strike Songyun Xian, a dazzling sword light was pulled out of his sleeve. The green-white sword light that was pulled out was even more dazzling than the huge thunderbolt that came crashing down from the sky. Its sharp tip pointed straight to the sky and suddenly expanded into a huge sword. Like a heavenly sword, it was about to pierce through the dark sky. Boom! Grey Cloud Xian held the huge sword in his hand and soared into the sky like a dragon. His aura erupted to an unprecedented peak as he directly pulled out his sword and smashed the huge thunderbolt sword that came crashing down. His cultivation had broken through the shackles at the most critical moment when his life was on the line, reaching a whole new realm. Bang! The 2 peerlessly powerful energies collided, exploded, and spread out. The space shook violently, and the powerful shock wave was like the explosion of a nuclear weapon, rushing out in all directions with an unstoppable momentum. The dark clouds that filled the sky with lightning and thunder were scattered by such a powerful shock wave. The blue sky appeared like a rapidly inflated balloon, and the golden sunlight quickly shone down from the spreading gap, forming a spectacular and enchanting spectacle. Grey Cloud Xian suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fell straight to the ground below. He knelt on one knee and used his sword as a pillar. He buried his head and panted. Under his messy hair, a long line of blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Heartless Palace's 3 swords as one sword-drawing style. The crowd that was watching the show burst into exclamations. Everyone turned around and fled under the pursuit of the huge shockwave. Oh my god! Was he still human? This was like the explosion of a nuclear weapon. Yu Qianzhou was scared out of his wits. There was a trail of blood on his lips and he looked at the shock wave in disbelief. Almost at the same time as the shock wave exploded, a loud and resounding cry rang out. The cloud rock brazenly revealed its true form. It spread its jade-white wings and spun like a shuttle. It drew a dazzling white light and directly rushed towards the shock wave, brazenly traversing the majestic shock wave. Just as Yu Qianzhou came to his senses and was about to flee back to Utopia in fear, he suddenly saw the cloud rock pouncing over in its true form, wrapping its two large claws around him. After grabbing Yu Qianqiu, the cloud rock spread its wings again and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it soared into the sky and narrowly avoided the shock wave below. A pair of large golden eyes stared down below. Grey Cloud Xian, who was on the ground, was also looking up at him with his head raised. The cloud rock did not stay any longer. It carried Yu Qianqiu and quickly flew towards the illusory immortal city. Cloud rock. You can protect him now, but you can't protect him forever. Grey Cloud Xian's angry roar resounded through the heavens and earth. He knew that he could not catch up to the cloud rock. Moreover, he was injured, so he could only roar to vent his anger. Within the illusory immortal city, almost all the people from the various sects flew into the sky, including the people from the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. An earth-shattering sound came from afar, and it indeed shocked everyone. This kind of commotion could only be caused by a battle between immortal emperors. A white stream of light flew towards the World Commerce Alliance at an unbelievable speed. The experts of the various sects in the illusory immortal city immediately saw that it was the cloud rock flying in its true form. Everyone had more or less received the news that Grey Cloud Xian had gone to chase after Yu Qianqiu. Now that they saw the cloud rock flying in its true form, coupled with the commotion just now, everyone had reason to suspect that the cloud rock and Grey Cloud Xian were fighting. The great bright wheel, which was floating in the sky, frowned and shot towards the World Commerce Alliance in a flash. Chapter 932. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed and landed on the rooftop of the World Commerce Association. Yunpeng quickly returned to his original form and landed as well. Both of them didn't look too good, especially Yu Qianqiu, whose mouth was still stained with blood. Wei Chuanqiu quickly sized up the two and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there was nothing wrong with them. He had also been alarmed by the huge commotion in the distance. At this moment, De Minglun flashed over and looked at Yunpeng and Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Yunpeng, did you fight with Songyun Exen?" Yunpeng shook his head with a grave expression. "Fuck. That old bastard is really abnormal. Is he interested in me pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? He actually hit a big killer move." Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva and cursed as he wiped the blood off his mouth. Although Songyun Xian's earth-shattering attack didn't directly affect him, he was injured by the momentum that shook the heaven and earth. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken, but as soon as he did, Wei Chuanqiu's anger flared up and he yelled at him, "Kid, there's something wrong with your brain. You knew that guy was waiting for a chance to deal with you, but you still dared to run out of hallucinatory immortal city. You're courting death. It doesn't matter if you die, but don't drag others down with you." Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth but shut it in the end. He wanted to lure Songyun Xian out by relying on his ability to control the heavenly lightning. Who knew that Songyun Exen was indeed an expert at the Immortal Emperor stage? His cultivation was simply too powerful. He wasn't someone that Mo Wuji could deal with. He finally understood that with his early minor immortal cultivation, it was better to avoid provoking Immortal Emperor experts in the future. De Minglun looked suspiciously at Yu Qianqiu and asked Yunpeng, "Such a big commotion, if it wasn't you fighting Songyun Exen, could it be him? Or could it be someone else?" Yunpeng was stunned by the question. He thought about it carefully and really didn't know who Songyun Xian was fighting. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and remained silent. Wei Chuanqiu scratched his head and said, "Is there something you can't tell us?" Yunpeng shook his head and said, "This is really unimaginable. I don't know who he is fighting with, but..." Songyun Xian's potential exploded at the critical moment. He actually broke through to the intermediate stage of the Immortal Emperor stage in one go and comprehended the Heartless Palace's 3 swords as one sword drawing style in one go. It was precisely because of the formidable power of the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance that he was able to survive. Otherwise he would have definitely died this time. Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style. Great Bright Wheel and Wei Chuanqiu exclaimed at the same time, their faces filled with disbelief. "Not bad." Yunpeng nodded slowly and said, "Absolute heaven, absolute earth, absolute emotion, 3 swords as one sword drawing technique." After a moment of silence, Wei Chuanqiu let out a sigh of relief and exclaimed, "This is really unexpected." Songyun Exen actually comprehended the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. The Heartless Palace's position as the #1 sect in the celestial world is becoming more and more stable. Seeing the 3 early-stage Immortal Emperor experts exclaim repeatedly, Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but ask, could it be that this sword-drawing stance is very famous in the celestial world? Wei Chuanqiu subconsciously replied and sighed. The Heartless Palace's sword-drawing stance is famous in the celestial world. It is the Heartless Palace's ultimate technique. The Heartless Palace relied on this technique to secure their position as the #1 sect in the celestial world. The sword-drawing style has 1 absolute heaven, 2 absolute earth and 3 heartless. Most of the Heartless Palace's disciples would find it extremely difficult to master the first sword, let alone the last 2. It's even more difficult to fuse the 2 sword styles into 1 sword-drawing style. In that case, isn't Songyun Xian's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance the strongest sword-drawing stance of the Heartless Palace? Yu Qianzhou asked. Yes. Wei Chuanqiu said in amazement. Before this, only the sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, could fuse 3 swords into 1 sword-drawing stance. It is said that Wang Qing was a very handsome man, but in order to sever his emotions and desires to fuse 3 swords into 1 sword-drawing stance, he killed his wife and children and killed his entire family. In the end, he didn't stop and didn't even let himself off. He actually destroyed his own face. In the end, his hard work paid off and he really mastered the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Because of this, most of the other sects in the celestial world became family sections. Only the Heartless Palace is an exception. De Mingluan nodded slightly. Looking at the past and present, those peerless experts have a mind that is hard to reach. Very few of them would drag their families down with them. These words made Yu Qianzhou sigh. He first thought of his master. Bai Tongqun was the same. He pursued the peak of cultivation and didn't care about his family. Yu Qianzhou thought of himself and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Suddenly Yunpeng thought about it and interrupted. If I'm not wrong, Songyun Xian should be thankful for what happened today. If he wasn't forced into a desperate situation, it would be very difficult for him to break through this shackle and instantly comprehend the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance of the Heartless Palace. I have to say that its fate can be considered his luck. Yu Qianzhou was taken aback. He gulped with difficulty and said, You mean that the reason Songyun Xian was able to comprehend the 3-in-1 sword-drawing style was because he was forced to do so by that bolt of lightning? That's just my guess, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Yunpeng glanced at him and said, Otherwise, based on the fact that you killed his only grandson, he wouldn't have bothered talking to you in that situation. Once he used the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance, you would have been dead. Why did he have to suffer so much and only draw his sword in the end? Yu Qianzhou was dumbfounded. In that case, he had helped Songyun Xian greatly by not killing him with the heavenly lightning. This matter was Motherf***. When Yu Qianzhou thought about how Songyun Xian would use that frightening 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance to deal with him in the future, his scalp went numb. One thing was certain. Songyun Xian would definitely not let him go. He coughed and asked, Is there any way to defend or break this 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance of the Heartless Palace? The 3 of them looked at him together and guessed his concerns. Wei Chuanqiu sneered and said, You want to defend and break it? With your abilities. Let me tell you, try your best to avoid him in the future. Not meeting him is the best way to save your life. De Mingluan nodded and explained, Those who have cultivated the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance in the Heartless Palace will carry a few swords that they won't use easily. Absolute Heaven, Absolute Earth, Absolute Emotion 2-in-1 sword-drawing stance, and 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance basically have a matching sword. Those who have cultivated all 5 sword-drawing stances will usually carry 5 swords that they won't use easily. These 5 swords represent the peak sword intents of the user's 5 types and cultivation. It's fine if they're not drawn, but once they're drawn, they'll be earth-shattering. Each sword is stronger than the last, especially the 5th sword that represents the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move. Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move. De Mingluan nodded and then added, After the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing mastered the 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance, other than that time when he was defeated by the Immortal Emperor, he has never had an opponent. It's probably very difficult for anyone in the 13 great immortal monarchs to be able to block Wang Qing's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance. Of course, Songyun Xian has just mastered it, so there's definitely a big gap between him and Wang Qing. However, at least the three of us can't block Songyun Xian's 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. As for you, there's no need to talk about it. He changed the topic and ignored Yu Qianqiu. He turned to Yun Ping and asked, "What happened just now?" Wei Chuanqiu also looked at him curiously. Yun Ping was silent for a while, then he told them what happened when the thunderbolts attacked Songyun Xian. After listening to him, De Mingluan and Wei Chuanqiu felt that it was a little unbelievable. They had never heard of such a strange thing. They couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu in confusion as if they were asking, "Why did the lightning only target Songyun Xian, but nothing happened to you at all?" Yu Qianqiu hurriedly shook his head and said, "I don't know what happened either, but there's one thing I'm sure of. Songyun Xian's rude words angered the heavens, and in the end he was punished by thunderbolts. Many people saw this with their own eyes." De Mingluan and Wei Chuanqiu looked at Yun Ping in unison. They didn't quite believe this explanation. Yun Ping was speechless. At that time, Songyun Xian did say to the thunderbolts in the sky that it was only SOSO, but was that really the reason? That was a little too mysterious. Seeing that he couldn't get an answer, De Mingluan didn't want to stay any longer. After all, because of his identity he couldn't stay for long, so he immediately said goodbye to them and left. Apart from Yun Ping on the rooftop, the other two went down to the 22nd floor. In the corridor, Wei Chuanqiu suddenly asked sneakily via voice transmission, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me honestly. Are you related to the heavenly lightning targeting Songyun Xian?" Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why would you have such an idea? Do you think I can control the heavenly lightning?" He did not directly say that he couldn't control it and let the other party think about it himself. Wei Chuanqiu frowned and thought about it, but she also felt that it was unlikely. After the two of them split up, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia. He first looked for Zhang Ping to ask about the progress of the pill refinement. Qin Feng did not delay, but after all he had limited manpower, and the speed of the refinement was indeed not satisfactory. He paced back and forth in the military camp's conference room for a while before disappearing. In China, the headquarters of the Hong Gang and the Qin Gang were still under the big tree in front of the flat ground halfway up the mountain behind the mountain god temple. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun were summoned together. Yu Qianqiu looked at the mountain god temple with green smoke curling up from the foot of the mountain. He reached out to touch the rough bark of the big tree and slowly said, "Gu Qing, immediately send a group of people overseas to search for the volcanic island. Hong Qi, send someone to pass on my order. Gather all the cultivators in the world who know how to refine pills and gather in the East Holy Land." Chapter 933. Gu Qingyun, on the other hand, had no objections and immediately accepted the order. However, Hong Qi was somewhat hesitant. "Master, you just told me this matter before. I still haven't figured out the situation. I'm afraid it will be difficult to gather all the cultivators in the world who can refine pills in a short period of time. Why don't you give me some time first?" "There's no time for you to slowly prepare." Yu Qianqiu turned around, looked at him and said slowly, "Directly order the recruitment to the entire cultivation world. If anyone is found to be avoiding the recruitment, kill without mercy. There's no need to play cat and mouse with them at this time. Whoever wants to play can die." "Understood." Hong Qi cupped his hands in response. After Yu Qianqiu explained the matter clearly, he did not stay any longer and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Within the ruins of God, Yu Qianqiu appeared in the small valley where he had saved Shui Mingqing. His trip this time was to scout the way and prepare for the subsequent actions. The valley was still the same valley, nothing had changed. Yu Qianqiu carefully looked around. There were only some short old branches that had grown for who knew how many years, looking somewhat sinister in the mist, but he did not find any danger. The surroundings were very quiet. He immediately flew to the top of the mountain and looked around. Just like before, the world was still covered in white and his vision could not see far away. Whoosh! Yu Qianqiu's body turned into a stream of light and quickly flew away. With the valley as the center, he flew close to the ground and circled around. Occasionally he could see some strange and abnormally timid animals that were scared away by him. After walking around, he felt that there was no danger and finally felt a lot more at ease. He then changed his direction and flew towards the direction of the thick fog wall that connected the heavens and the earth. Now that his cultivation had stepped into the immortal stage, he felt that he had some ability to protect himself. He wanted to see what was hidden behind the fog wall. With his current flying speed, it didn't take him half a day to stop in front of the fog wall that connected the heavens and the earth. Thinking back to the scene of several experts from the Immortal Palace joining hands to kill a giant snake, he was somewhat hesitant to go in. After hesitating for a while, he clenched his teeth and rushed in. However, his flying speed had already slowed down. He released his divine sense to investigate the surroundings as he slowly advanced forward. Who would have thought that after spending half a day he still wouldn't be able to break through the thick fog that was so thick that he couldn't even see his own fingers in front of him? This made him even more cautious. One must know that the more unknown a place was, the easier it was for one's nerves to be on edge. At first he did not notice anything unusual in the thick fog, but as he went deeper and deeper he began to hear the occasional dull sound of something being crushed. There was also the sound of heavy breathing that sounded like bellows, as if some huge animal was walking below. Just as Xianxia was about to use his divine sense to check what it was, he suddenly discovered that his body, which was moving forward, had come to a halt. After struggling for a moment, he felt as though he had slammed into a large net, and his whole body seemed to have been entangled in the net. Faster, thief! Did someone set a trap here? Xianxia was shocked. He had been using his divine sense to explore the way. How could there be such a large net lying in front of him without him noticing it? His head approached the place where his body and limbs were entangled, and he immediately found that he was not entangled in a net, but was stuck by a rope net that was as thick as a child's arm. The strange thing was that this rope net was crystal clear and covered with mucus. When his divine sense swept over it, it actually passed through the air as if it was nothing. Faster, thief! What the hell is this? Xianxia quickly released his divine sense to investigate, and found that he had actually broken into a canyon. This net seemed to be deliberately set up in the canyon to wait for him. Xianxia struggled hard, but found that the stickiness of this thing was difficult to estimate. Even with his cultivation he couldn't get rid of it. Then a feeling of numbness began to spread from his skin that was stuck, and the clothes that were stuck on his body began to emit black smoke and rot. Needless to say, this transparent rope net was highly toxic. Otherwise it would not be able to corrode his immortal body that he had forged. After a moment of surprise, he suddenly felt a tremor from both ends of the transparent giant rope net. It seemed as though something was quickly climbing over from both ends of the rope net, and was quickly approaching him. Moreover, there was also a heart-palpitating zhi-zhi sound coming from it. It felt as though he was the prey and there were two things fighting to hunt him. Xianxia didn't dare to hesitate. His whole body emitted a purple flame, and with a buzz sound he burned a big hole in the middle of the rope net that was stuck to him, and he quickly dodged. He looked at the place where he was stuck just now, but there was a thick fog and he couldn't see anything. He released his divine sense again to investigate and found that there were two huge arthropods in the air, and they were quickly converging at the center of the canyon. Wind rise! Xianxia let out a light shout and held a ball of purple fire in each of his palms. A gust of wind immediately rose in the canyon, and the thick fog that pervaded the surroundings was quickly dispersed. The dim canyon immediately revealed its true appearance. Xianxia's eyes gradually widened as he looked ahead, and he seemed to be in disbelief. This was a large canyon that was 100 meters wide and hundreds of meters high. Although the canyon was wide enough, it still gave people a feeling of a thin line of sky when they looked up. On both sides of the dark mountain rocks, there were all kinds of colorful arthropods attached to them. Their bodies were either huge or growing steadily. Not to mention their huge bodies, they were all covered in hard armor. If they curled up and didn't move, just using divine sense to investigate would probably cause people to mistake them for rocks. No wonder when he used his divine sense to investigate the canyon on both sides, he didn't discover them. Following the use of the purple fire energy to create a gust of wind that whistled through the canyon, pairs of tentacles began to extend from the craggy mountain rocks. Disgusting worms that were as large as worms crawled out from all over the place. These pink worms were covered in mucus, expanding their disgusting circular mouths and making xiao-xiao sounds against the wind, as if they were hungry and wanted to eat. A circle of ferocious fangs constantly opened and retracted inside their circular mouths, and mucus like mucus slid down from their mouths. It was a horrifying sight to behold. At the bottom of the canyon there were dense white bones everywhere. There was no lack of human bones, but most of them were the corpses of various animals. Some of the bones had already turned yellow and black, and some of them were already covered in a layer of moss. It was obvious that they had existed here for many years. It was unknown how many corpses and bones had accumulated in the canyon over the countless years. Some strange animals climbed on top of the various skeletons, constantly sniffing, as if they wanted to find some scattered meat on the skeletons to fill their stomachs. Yu Qianqiu frowned. He never thought that there would be such a disgusting place in the ruins of God. His gaze then landed on the large net in the middle of the canyon. Although he had burned a large hole in the middle, it did not affect his ability to recognize its full appearance. It was actually a giant spider web. Two big, fluffy, colorful spiders with a body size of 5 to 6 meters crawled to the gap in the broken web. After looking around with their big black eyes, they didn't find any prey. Then they quickly spat out crystal-clear spider silk that was as thick as a child's arm, quickly repairing the damaged area. Whoosh! A ray of multicolored light flew out from Yu Qianqiu's hand and slashed at the spider web. A strand of spider silk was suddenly stretched out and then it quickly bounced back. A flying sword was stuck on it, swaying. The two large spiders vigilantly stopped spitting silk and suddenly turned around at the same time. Their huge bodies climbed on the spider web as if they were flying, quickly rushing to the source of the earthquake. The two big fellows probably thought that they had caught their prey. The large spider that was closer naturally had the advantage of being in a favorable position. It was the first to reveal two light golden curved sharp teeth that were as long as a child's arm. He quickly clamped onto the flying sword and chewed it happily. With a ding sound, the flying sword was immediately broken into two pieces. It seemed to realize that it was not the food it had imagined, so it turned around and gave up. The flying sword that had been broken into two pieces swayed on the spider web. The spider that caught up with it pounced on the flying sword and chewed on it. With a ding, it similarly broke the flying sword into two pieces. It shook its head disinterestedly and turned around to continue mending the spider web. Yu Qianqiu, who had his eyes on the spider web and wanted to test its toughness, did not expect to see such a scene. He immediately let out a breath of cold air. The quality of the flying sword was not bad. It was given to him by Hui Yunlong, but he did not expect it to be bitten into two by the spider in just 2 bites. Oh my! What kind of spider is this? Its jaws are so powerful and the spider silk it spits out is also extraordinarily tough. Even a flying sword can't cut it. Yu Qianqiu mumbled to himself. His eyes gradually brightened. He quickly took out the jade archive and found the one with the records of the various beasts. In the end, even after going through it a few times, he could not find the original form of the spider in front of him. This made him even more astonished. Logically speaking, such a powerful spider could not possibly be a nobody. Why was there no record of it in this jade archive? Could it be a new species? He looked at his surroundings. If he had not accidentally stumbled into this place, he probably would not have been able to discover them. He wondered how many years these fellows had lived in this place. Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that there were only 2 of these spiders in the entire valley. His gaze fell on the spider web. He felt that it should be of great use, but he did not know how to collect it. He then looked at the pale golden jaws of the 2 spiders. He felt that they should be of great use as well. Just as Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and a purple flame flying sword materialized, ready to slaughter the 2 spiders and pry out their jaws, he saw that the 2 spiders had already mended the spider web. Their heads arched together for a while, then they crawled to the other end of the spider web together. Chapter 934. As soon as the 2 spiders climbed up the craggy mountain wall, the arthropods and ugly worms around them quickly retreated, as if they were extremely afraid of the 2 spiders. Those that could hide in the cracks on the mountain wall all shrank back. However, the 2 fellows suddenly seemed to have gone mad. Their 4 pairs of slender limbs quickly waved and rushed into the retreating swarm of worms. The 4 pairs of limbs were like the scythes of the Grim Reaper, madly waving about and slaughtering. The 8 sharp limbs stabbed in and killed one worm after another. The 2 fellows were like tigers that had entered a flock of sheep, wantonly slaughtering. They didn't know what was wrong with them, but it seemed like they hadn't offended them at all. However, even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone these evil creatures that lived here. A group of centipede-like, dark red, 1-meter-long multi-legged reptiles that were much larger than the centipedes launched a frenzied counterattack, engulfing them like a tidal wave. For a moment, all kinds of ear-piercing screeches sounded from the mountain wall. The entire mountain wall was in chaos. Yu Qianqiu put away the purple flame flying sword, but still protected himself with purple flames. He watched the fierce battle between these worms with interest. This kind of scene was rare. He wanted to see if the 2 spiders could win against these tens of thousands of centipede-like worms. The situation was obvious. Since the two spiders dared to start a war, they were clearly very confident and didn't fear these pseudo-centipedes at all. They waved their 8 sharp limbs and quickly killed their way out of the heavy encirclement. With a casual wave of their limbs, several worms fell to the bottom of the valley. Meanwhile, an animal that looked like a mouse would immediately crawl out from the bottom of the valley and quickly eat the worms that fell. Although the tens of thousands of worms were brave, it seemed like they couldn't bite through the carapace of the two spiders. Just like that, groups of worms were beaten to the bottom of the valley. Not long after, more than half of them were dead or injured. These worms clearly knew that this couldn't go on for long, so they quickly retreated in defeat and fled in all directions. The two large spiders also stopped their chase. Their abdomens each spat out a strand of spider silk towards the rock. With a whoosh, they dropped down to the bottom of the valley. Those animals that looked like mice immediately fled, obviously very afraid of them. As soon as the two large spiders landed on the ground, they immediately waved their 8 large limbs and pierced through the pile of reptile corpses. Not long after, their 8 limbs were filled with reptile corpses like roasted lamb skewers. In the end, the two of them carried a large amount of prey and crawled to a bend at the bottom of the canyon before disappearing. Could it be that there's a nest down there and they're returning to their nest? Xianxia muttered to himself. He rubbed his chin and hesitated for a while before he flew towards the bottom of the valley. He went around the corner and found the reason why they had disappeared. There was a cave with a diameter of more than 10 meters on the stone wall. There were many scratches on the entrance of the cave, which were obviously left by the two spiders. At the bottom of the valley, piles of bones piled up, and a foul stench wafted out of the cave. Xianxia listened at the entrance of the cave for a while. In the end, he couldn't help but quietly float in. It couldn't be helped, he had always been too curious. There weren't any obstructions in the cave and it was very spacious. It was probably because of the spiders going in and out, but the winding passageway was a little too dark. At this time, Xianxia didn't have the mood to use the purple flames to control the wind outside. The canyon outside the cave was filled with thick fog after a while. After walking along the passageway of the cave for about a kilometer, there was a faint phosphorescent light in front of him. Specks of phosphorescent light appeared on the walls of the cave. The deeper he went, the brighter the light became. In the end, he could already see things normally. Suddenly, a creaking sound like metal rubbing against each other came from the end of the cave. From it, one could hear a kind of irritable emotion which was obviously coming from an animal. Xianxia was slightly startled and then he sped up and flew over. Not long after, he saw the end of the cave. Before he understood the situation, he didn't dare to expose himself. His whole body quietly entered the cave wall. After passing through the mountain to an advantageous position, he poked a small hole in the wall and squinted his eyes to peek inside. At the end of the cave was a huge space. It was like an inverted spindle in the belly of the mountain. There were many huge stalagmites hanging upside down. In the center of the largest stalagmites, there was a huge spider web with a diameter of several hundred meters. However, there was nothing on it. There was a spider silk hanging down from the spider web. Xianxia adjusted his vision and followed the spider silk to look at the place where the violent noise was coming from. In the end, he didn't know if he didn't look, but after he got a clear look, he was immediately alarmed. He saw a giant spider about 10 meters in size waving its legs, kicking the reptile corpses that the two spiders had brought over. It was unknown if it was dissatisfied with the food or if it was sick of it. Not only was this giant spider bigger than the two spiders he had seen before, but its body was also light gold in color, especially its 4 pairs of limbs which were like golden spears. The pair of jaws on its mouth was a mixture of red and gold, and there was a faint glow flowing on them. It was not like the two spiders with colorful and furry bodies. Its carapace was bright and clean. If one did not pay attention, they would almost be mistaken for a crab. At this moment, the Spider King suddenly used its hind legs to prop up its body. Its abdomen was covered with densely packed balls. Each of them was the size of a fist and there were probably more than 1,000 of them. They were glistening yellow and clean. Suddenly, it used its 2 front legs to pluck a yellow ball from its abdomen and raised it up. Xianxia could vaguely see the shape of a small spider inside the yellow ball. Needless to say, it was definitely a spider egg. However, what surprised Xianxia was that the Spider King actually stuffed the spider egg into its mouth and chewed it. It seemed to be eating it with relish, and when one was not enough, it plucked another one and stuffed it into its mouth. Just like that, it ate more than a dozen. It actually ate its own eggs. It really was a heartless beast. Xianxia's expression could not help but twitch. He was not the only one who could not stand it anymore. The two colorful spiders also surrounded the Spider King and let out a sorrowful squeak, as if they wanted to stop the Spider King from doing this. After eating more than a dozen spider eggs, the Spider King was finally satisfied. It propped its upper body up and lay back on the ground. The two colorful spiders immediately stabbed the scattered reptile corpses and piled them in front of the Spider King. The Spider King looked a little disinterested as it slowly swallowed the reptile corpses in front of it. It did not seem to be to its liking. After eating, it waved its front legs impatiently and chased the two big spiders away. Then the Spider King turned around and pulled on the spider silk hanging in the air, slowly climbing up the spider web. Just as it was about to climb to the top of the spider web, its careless gaze suddenly paused, and its huge body also stopped moving in the air. Its gaze found a small hole in the mountain wall, and its gaze met with the gaze of the person inside. Xianxia was startled. He seemed to see a trace of a smile in the other's eyes. The spider is smiling at me? Then he thought to himself, oh no. He had been discovered. He did not know if this Spider King was strong or if he could handle it. But when he thought that he could escape at any time, he calmed down and looked outside. Then he was stunned again. He saw that the huge silhouette had disappeared from the spider web. Instead, a net bed had appeared on the spider web, and a beautiful woman in flowery clothes was lying on it. She was looking at him with a smile. It's been a long time since I had a guest in my cave abode. I wonder which esteemed guest has arrived? Why don't you come out and meet me? The woman in flowery clothes said with a smile. Damn. This savage beast could already assume human form. Xianxia checked the other party's cultivation and found that she was only at the early stage minor immortal stage, about the same as him. Immediately he felt more at ease. The wall in front of him melted away and Xianxia walked in openly. You're human? The woman in flowery clothes who was lying on her side sat up from the net bed in surprise. Then she floated down and circled around Xianxia to size him up. There was a look of disbelief on her face. Of course I am human. This question made Xianxia feel depressed. However, from the other party's point of view, they were not the same kind, so it was understandable for her to ask such a question. Xianxia remained vigilant as he sized up the other party. The woman in flowery clothes had a fair and clean face. Her appearance was also very beautiful, and she had the temperament of a noble lady. However, the most conspicuous thing was her belly, which was bulging and looked like she was about to give birth after 10 months of pregnancy. However, when he thought of the scene of her eating his child, Xianxia suddenly felt nauseous. After circling a few times, the woman in flowery clothes rubbed her big belly with both hands and stopped in front of Xianxia. She frowned and said, "That's strange. How can a human enter the divine ruin realm now? Logically speaking, it should be 100 years later. Could it be that you didn't get out in time when the divine ruin realm closed last time?" Xianxia made a non-committal sound. The woman in flowery clothes immediately clicked her tongue in surprise and said, "So you have some ability. Otherwise, how could you have survived until now with your early-stage minor immortal cultivation? I wonder why you called me out." Xianxia asked indifferently. "Yo." The woman in flowery clothes felt that it was somewhat inconceivable and said, "You trespassed into my cave abode and now you're in the right. If there's nothing else, I won't accompany you. Goodbye." Xianxia flashed and flew out of the cave, too lazy to pay attention to her. "Stop, do you think my place is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman in flowery clothes immediately sneered and said, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time. It's a good change of taste." Then she spread her arms and a white light flashed out from her sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and covered most of the cave abode, trapping Xianxia inside. The woman in flowery clothes pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as she was about to pull Xianxia over, she saw that his body suddenly emitted a purple flame, burning the rope net that trapped him into ashes on the spot. Chapter 935. "Stop, do you think this is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman immediately sneered, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time, it's time for a change of taste." Then he spread his arms and a white light quickly flashed out from his sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and enveloped most of the cave, trapping Yu Qianzhou on the spot. The woman pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as he was about to drag Yu Qianzhou over, he saw a purple flame suddenly erupt from the other party's body, burning the rope net that trapped him to ashes on the spot. Purple flame. The woman cried out involuntarily. Her spider clan was most afraid of fire, especially the spider silk that spiders spit out. Raging fire was the natural nemesis of spider silk, and it would usually burn when it encountered fire. Of course, for a spider demon like her, ordinary raging fire naturally couldn't do anything to her, but now she saw the purple flame of the supreme flame. How could she not be afraid when her nemesis was in front of her? Even in her dreams, she had never thought that she would meet someone who could control the purple flame when she acted rashly. Yu Qianzhou floated in the air, his whole body burning with purple flames. He slowly turned around and stared at her coldly. "Although you're a spider demon, I've never killed a pregnant woman. I originally wanted to spare your life, but who knew that you wouldn't know what's good for you? You're courting death, don't blame me." Feeling the pressure of the purple flame, the woman's limbs immediately became weak. Her expression was somewhat bitter as she cupped her hands and said, "Your Excellency, I've been presumptuous. Please, for the sake of the child in my stomach, temporarily stop and listen to my explanation." "For the sake of the child in your stomach? How dare you say such words?" Yu Qianzhou immediately flew into a rage and said, "Do you think I didn't see what you ate earlier? I know what you saw, but there's something you don't know." The woman smiled bitterly. "Even if I don't eat them, they won't be able to survive. I can't explain this to you in a short time, and you don't have the patience to listen to me slowly. I just want to tell you that I'm the only female spider left among the temple rainbow spiders. If I die, my race will be in danger of going extinct. I hope your Excellency can show mercy." Once Yu Qianzhou became angry, he was definitely a ruthless person. But after hearing her words, he couldn't help but ask, "Temple rainbow spider? What temple? If it wasn't for the child in my stomach, I wouldn't be easily threatened even though you have the purple flames." The flowery-clothed woman first confessed, then explained, "This divine ruin realm was originally created by the phoenix god, and there is a phoenix temple in the divine ruin realm. The ancestors of our rainbow spider were originally spiders who cultivated under the eaves of the temple. Later on, for some unknown reason, the phoenix god expelled all the living beings from the temple and sealed the phoenix temple. Since then, the divine ruins realm has never seen the figure of the phoenix god again. After countless years, due to various reasons, our rainbow spider race has been declining day by day, and I am the only female spider left, so I hope that your Excellency can show mercy." "Phoenix god? Phoenix?" Yu Qianzhou was slightly startled and could not help but think of the crow on Wu Lishue's shoulder that claimed to be a phoenix. He paused for a moment and said, "You mean there is a sealed temple called the Phoenix Temple in the Divine Ruins realm?" "Exactly." The flowery-clothed woman nodded. She could already feel that the killing intent on Yu Qianzhou's body had subsided, and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. "Temple? I wonder what's in the temple." Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. "Where is the temple located in the Divine Ruins realm? As long as you tell me, I can spare your life." "I don't want to lie to you." The flowery-clothed woman muttered to herself, "I've only heard the story of the phoenix god sealing the temple. As for where the temple is sealed in the Divine Ruins realm, I don't think anyone can find it." Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and said, "Saying so much is equivalent to not saying anything. You're not lying to me, are you? There are many dangerous places in the Divine Ruins realm. If I really wanted to lie to you, I could have casually pointed out a dangerous place for you to die. Why would I need to do this?" The flowery-clothed woman replied. After going around in a circle, it was equivalent to saying nothing. Yu Qianzhou's gaze was slightly cold and the killing intent in his heart rose again. He wanted to strip the spider demon of anything useful, but looking at her protruding stomach, he did not harden his heart to make a move. It would have been fine if she was in her spider form, but she had transformed into a pregnant woman in human form. "My name is Yu Qianzhou, what's your name?" Yu Qianzhou coughed and asked. When the flowery-clothed woman saw him ask such a question, she knew that the possibility of making a move was not high. The danger had passed, so she replied with a smile, "My name is Kai Feng." Yu Qianzhou looked at her smiling face, which was like a flower. She did not look like the spider demon that had just devoured his child. He could not help but feel a little depressed, wondering if he was too soft-hearted. He frowned and said, Kaifeng, let me ask you, why is the Divine Ruins realm always covered in fog? Kaifeng was startled, then suddenly smiled sweetly and said, the fog is only within a certain distance from the exit of the Divine Ruins realm. After passing through the canyon outside, you will naturally not be able to see the white fog that does not dissipate all year round. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to ask more, but he suddenly received a summons from Zhang Ping in Utopia. It seemed that the things he had asked Zhang Ping to prepare before coming to the Divine Ruins realm had already been prepared. After thinking for a while, he thought that it would not be long before he returned, so he said to Kaifeng, I have something to do, so I'll take my leave for now. I'll disturb you another day. Kaifeng smiled and watched as Yu Qianqiu turned into a stream of light and flashed out of the cave. On a remote island, Zhang Ping had already brought a large amount of immortal herbs to wait for him. There was no other reason than the quality of the immortal pills refined by Qin Feng, and the others was far inferior to the ones refined by him. He was afraid that something would happen to the Utopia army after consuming them. After all, they were his direct subordinates, so he decided to personally refine a batch for the Utopia army. On the island, Zhang Ping used the earth mantra to clear a large piece of hard and flat land. Yu Qianqiu stood in the middle, his palms burning with a light green pillar of fire that was 1,000 feet tall. Zhang Ping circled and danced around the light green pillar of fire. He wore a storage bracelet that his master had given him on each of his wrists, and he kept throwing immortal herbs from the storage bracelet into the rising and burning light green pillar of fire. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and calmly refined the immortal pills. In the fire pillars supported by his palms, 200 layers of pills were being refined at the same time. This scene of pill refinement shocked Zhang Ping. This was equivalent to a person refining 400 cauldrons of pills at the same time. One person was equivalent to 400 alchemy experts. Yu Qianqiu did not need to worry about the rest. He only needed to focus on refining, and Zhang Ping would handle the rest. Zhang Ping continued to fly around the pillar of fire. Whenever an immortal pill popped out from a certain level, he would immediately rush over to collect it into his storage bracelet. Then he would take out an immortal herb from another storage bracelet and place it into the empty space. Master and disciple worked together without any distractions. Furnace after furnace of immortal pills were produced almost continuously, and the refining efficiency was very high. Half a month later, 50,000 restriction-breaking pills, 10,000 marrow-cleansing pills, and 10,000 immortal ascension pills were refined. After continuously refining for half a month, both master and disciple were somewhat exhausted. Zhang Ping held the storage bracelet filled with immortal pills and offered it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, I won't be personally handling this matter. Just as I instructed, you will be in charge. Gather the army and get everyone to bring everything that can be used or taken away from the camp. Then bring them here. Having said that, he looked around and continued, let everyone forge their immortal physiques in one go. After this, I will take everyone to another place for a period of training so that the army's strength can be improved as soon as possible. Zhang Ping paused and asked, should we inform Mistress and the others to come as well? There's no need. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, just gather the army, don't inform the others. We're just going to train, it's not like we won't come back. This is our rear, we're just leaving for a while. Understood. Zhang Ping cupped his hands and flew away. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged on the ground to recover his spirit. After recovering, he flew to the main peak of the island and hid there, waiting for Zhang Ping to bring the army. He did this because there were some things that he couldn't let too many people know for now. In less than a day, Zhang Ping had brought nearly 10,000 well-prepared people to the island. In reality, there were only about 9,000 people in total. Zhang Ping had been briefed beforehand, so he knew what to do. He distributed the refined pills according to the number of people. All of the team members were well-trained and obedient. No one would be long-winded. After Zhang Ping explained everything clearly, he gave the order and everyone immediately followed the steps unconditionally. More than 9,000 people sat cross-legged in a formation and began to consume pills to increase their cultivation levels. The painful process was naturally the same as that of the soldier in Utopia's conference room. Almost 10,000 people endured it step by step until they consumed immortal ascension pills to increase their cultivation levels to the immortal realm. No matter how disciplined they were, they couldn't help but feel excited. As Zhang Peng had to take charge of the situation, he didn't consume pills to increase his cultivation level. When he saw that everyone had achieved their goal, he couldn't help but look around in excitement. He couldn't help but doubt his master's words about using the heavenly lightning to forge an immortal body. The sky was clear and sunny. How could there be the possibility of heavenly lightning descending? Almost 10,000 people who were told about the process of forging an immortal body also looked around, deeply doubting whether there would be heavenly lightning descending. Just as everyone was feeling puzzled, a strong gust of wind blew, and the sea outside the island suddenly became turbulent. In the blink of an eye, the world turned dark. Dark clouds started to gather in the sky above. Following a thunderous explosion in the sky, electric snakes flashed through the clouds. Chapter 936. Not long after, the island had already turned dark. Only the flashes of lightning illuminated the tens of thousands of dumbfounded men sitting cross-legged on the ground, naked from head to toe. Rumble. The rolling lightning reverberated in the dark clouds. Enough energy had been accumulated. Yu Qianzhou, who was hiding on the mountain peak, looked down from the sky and transmitted his voice. Zhang Peng, tell them to get ready. Zhang Peng immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the tens of thousands of team members sitting cross-legged in front of him, raised his right arm and shouted, "Get ready." As soon as he gave the order, everyone immediately focused and closed their eyes. At this moment, countless lightning snakes crackled and tangled in the dark clouds above. Zhang Ping raised his head and his vision blurred. He saw tens of thousands of bright lightning bolts coming down with a swoosh, and they corresponded to each team member's body. Tens of thousands of dazzling green and white lightning bolts connected the sky and the earth, twisting and twisting in the air. One end was tied to the dark clouds, and the other end was tied to each team member's body. It was as if countless heavenly ropes were thrown down from the sky. It was a spectacular sight. At first the team members trembled, but when they realized that the destructive power of the lightning was controlled just right, they all calmed down and focused on using the miraculous reaction between the lightning and celestial core power to slowly improve their physical bodies. Dazzling green and white circles of lightning could be seen moving up and down their bodies. Zhang Peng looked at the spectacular scene in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotion. He admired his master's miraculous methods. He didn't expect his master to be able to summon the sky full of lightning and control it in the palm of his hand. The weight of Yu Qianzhou in his heart became heavier and he became more and more respectful. Just as he was feeling emotional, he suddenly realized that there was one more person beside him. It was none other than Hong Qi. The smile on Hong Qi's face froze, and his eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at the spectacular scene in front of him. "Zhang Ping, I'll watch over here, you guys can start too." Yu Qianzhou's voice rang in their ears, and the two of them did not dare to hesitate and immediately started to carry out his orders. Zhang Ping gave the required pills to Hong Qi, and the two of them sat cross-legged in front of the crowd, swallowed the pills and circulated them. After the two were baptized by the lightning and forged their immortal physiques, they opened their eyes and saw nearly 10,000 eyes full of joy. Obviously, they had forged their immortal physiques before them. However, he was still sitting cross-legged on the ground naked like the two of them. Before receiving any orders, they had been sitting there waiting. This was the result of years of training. The dark clouds in the sky began to dissipate, revealing the clear blue sky once again. Yu Qianzhou, who was at the peak of the mountain, looked down with satisfaction. This was a truly powerful army. This was the kind of army he wanted. As an army, they could think of ways to make up for the lack of cultivation, but if they lost their essence, qi and spirit, then there was no need to nurture them. Stand up. Dress up. Following Zhang Peng's command, nearly 10,000 people stood up in unison. They quickly picked up the storage pouches on the ground, took out their clothes and put them on. After putting on their clothes, they stood still like javelins. This scene made Hong Qi very envious. Although this army did not have as many people as his Hong gang, they were much stronger than the motley crew that was restricted by the gang rules. Close to 10,000 people, all of them at the immortal realm, and all of them were obedient, not afraid of sacrificing themselves. They would attack wherever they were pointed. Hong Qi looked around the crowd a few times, but he didn't see Guan Yu. He immediately understood that his master had already used the method of boiling a frog in warm water to slowly pass the command of this army to his junior brother Zhang Ping. It was obvious that the people his master trusted the most were still the two of them. While he felt proud, he could not help but smack his lips and look at Zhang Ping with great envy. Although he had a lot more freedom outside, if his master agreed, he would not hesitate to change positions with Zhang Ping. This was because it was too tiring to fight with people outside every day, and it was not as satisfying as leading this army. However, he also knew that in terms of leading troops to war, he could not compare to Zhang Ping, who was a fierce general who had been through many battles in the human world. This was also the main reason why his master had handed Utopia's army to Zhang Ping. If his junior brother Zhang Ping did not have the ability, even if he was his master's disciple, his master would not have handed this army to him. There was no doubt about this. On the flat ground at the foot of the mountain, aside from Hong Qi, everyone else, starting from Zhang Ping, stood there with their heads high and chests puffed out, not moving at all. Xianxia walked out from his hiding spot at the top of the mountain. He sat on a rock and looked at the army below silently, feeling very emotional. This elite army had been forged with years of blood, sweat, and tears. It was also accumulated bit by bit over time, and they already had a highly unified army soul with a will as strong as steel. Even if one of them died in this army, it would be a huge loss. However, the value of an army's existence was war and killing, but there would always be sacrifices in war and killing, which meant that the army would continue to lose members. Moreover, with their strength, the human world had already lost the right to be their battlefield. Their battlefield would be at a higher level in the near future, like the Celestial Realm or the Netherworld. However, compared to the Celestial Realm and the Netherworld, their strength was too weak, which meant that they would have to sacrifice even more. Xianxia's gaze was cast to the depths of the sea at some point in time. After some thought, he suddenly stood up and looked down with a determined gaze. He thought to himself, "I'll do my best to increase your cultivation level and give you the best equipment so that you can face the cruelest baptism of war. I'll turn you into my iron-blooded trump cards." With a flash, Xianxia suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Previously, he didn't want everyone to know that he was related to the lightning that filled the sky just now, but after some observation, he had full confidence in this army. This was an army that was worthy of his trust. Xianxia's sudden appearance didn't cause any movement in the group. Everyone continued to look straight ahead without blinking. After going through Zhang Peng's training, this army had already shed the last layer of ostentatiousness. It was no longer like before when they would eagerly call Xianxia leader when they saw him. In the army, all of their actions were under the command of the army. Salute. Zhang Ping gave the order and took the lead to salute. Nearly 10,000 people simultaneously saluted Xianxia in unison. This kind of military salute was plagiarized by Xianxia from his previous life. Although it looked a little disgusting and awkward, Xianxia felt that it was slightly more comfortable than kneeling, cupping one's hands and bending one's waist, so he made do with it. When Hong Qi saw the sonorous scene of the iron-blooded army, he felt an itch in his heart again. Xianxia nodded at everyone with satisfaction. Zhang Ping then gave the order and everyone returned to their original position. Suddenly, Xianxia spread out his arms and quickly enveloped everyone with his divine sense. In the blink of an eye, everyone disappeared on the spot. Only Hong Qi was left at the side looking around. He asked curiously, "Master, where did they go?" "Worry about your own matters." Xianxia waved his hand and sent him back. He then disappeared as well. Within the ruins of God, the moment Xianxia appeared in the valley where he had met Shui Mingqing, he saw that the army that had been sent in advance was already spread out in a state of alert. He immediately took out a large pile of illustrations and jade archives and handed them to Zhang Ping, who was beside him. He instructed, "This is the place where everyone will train. Find a favorable terrain to set up camp and prepare for long-term training. Make sure everyone has time to study these things. I'll go scout out the situation first." After giving some simple instructions, he disappeared again. In that disgusting canyon, Xianxia appeared in the spider's cave. He looked left and right, then dashed into the depths of the cave in a flash. Unexpectedly, he didn't fly far before he saw an encrypted spider web sealing off the passage. The web was too small, so it was impossible to drill through it. Xianxia frowned. His body ignited with purple flames and with a whoosh, he pierced a hole in the spider web. In the large space deep within the cave, the huge spider crawling on the giant spider web flashed with a red light, and turned back into that beautiful pregnant woman. Just as she floated down to the ground, Yu Qianzhou had already flashed into the cave abode. He stood in front of her and asked indifferently, "Why did you seal the passage into the cave?" Kai Feng smiled and said, "Please don't misunderstand, Mr. Yu. I was afraid that Mr. would suddenly visit and not be used to seeing me in my original form, so I set up a communication network. As long as someone breaks through the network and enters, I will immediately know and make preparations in advance." Then she immediately changed the topic and said, "May I know why Mr. Yu has returned this time? Can I trust you?" Yu Qianzhou suddenly asked. The big-bellied Kai Feng was startled. She paused and said, "With Mr.'s discerning eyes, can't you see that I have no ill intentions? As for whether you believe me or not, even if I say everything I can, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince Mr. to completely believe me. Trust is a process that can withstand the test of time. I wonder if I'm right?" Yu Qianzhou looked at her in a different light and said, "I couldn't tell, but a spider demon like you is quite knowledgeable about the ways of the world. In the ruins of God, demons are humans. In our eyes, the people who barge in are demons." Kai Feng rubbed her big belly and said with a smile, "Since I have a name, don't you think it's more appropriate to call me by my name? There's no need to keep talking about spider demons." "In that case I was rude." Yu Qianzhou looked at her belly and said with a faint smile, "Then I'll call you Madame Kai Feng from now on. Of course this is on the basis that I trust you. If I find that you're not trustworthy..." Yu Qianzhou walked behind her and gently extended his hand from her waist to touch her big belly. He smiled and said in her ear, "Then I'll kill you and the child in your stomach. I'll make your temple rainbow spider bloodline completely extinct." Chapter 937. Although these words were spoken with a smile on his face, Kai Feng could still hear a bone-chilling coldness in his words, and she couldn't help but shiver slightly. She pretended to twist her waist in discomfort and avoided his hand. She turned to look at him with a smile as she said, "Sir, there is no need for you to threaten this servant. You and I have a cooperative relationship to begin with, so this kind of threat is somewhat unreasonable." "Cooperative relationship?" Yu Qianzhou snorted. "When have we ever cooperated?" Kai Feng raised her hand to adjust the golden bone hairpin on her head and shook her head with a smile. "We haven't cooperated before, but that doesn't mean we won't cooperate in the future. Besides, the fact that Mr. can come back here and talk to me is already very clear. Mr., you wouldn't come here just to threaten me, would you? Why don't you be honest with me? Otherwise, how will I be able to ask for your help later?" Yu Qianzhou realized that this spider spirit was not as simple as she seemed. He immediately raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly, "You're very considerate. Speak. What do you want from me?" "I'm not in a hurry." Kai Feng rubbed her round belly and smiled. "Mister, you've come again. What can I do for you?" "What a smart lady, Kai Feng. Are you trying to figure me out first?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head. "I don't have anything. I just want to ask you why you ate your own offspring last time. I've been very confused about it. Since Mr. is unwilling to tell me, I won't force you. I'll tell you first." Kai Feng sighed faintly. "Actually, this has something to do with what I asked you to help me with. It's not that I want to eat my own flesh and blood, but even if they are born, I won't be able to protect them all. I'm afraid they won't live long. Instead of letting others kill them and feel sorry for them, I'd rather eat them and help their brothers and sisters hatch faster." "From what you said, you seem to have some enemies?" Yu Qianzhou asked calmly. "Mr. is very wise." Little Phoenix sighed and said, "On the great flaming mountain thousands of miles away from here, there's a group of giant strength fire apes. I don't know when they started to like forging strange things. Because our temple rainbow spider's shells are naturally hard and our claws are naturally sharp, we are their favorite targets. After so many years, our divine temple rainbow spiders have been almost completely exterminated by them. Only me and the two male spiders outside are left. It's so miserable, Wu." Yu Qianzhou saw that she started to cry as she spoke, and she was crying so miserably that it didn't seem like she was lying. He frowned and said, "You mean that group of giant strength fire apes killed you and used your claws and shells to forge things?" On the surface he looked sympathetic, but in his heart he was muttering, "Not to mention others, even I want to peel off your claws and carapace." Although he thought so, it was not easy for him to meet a demon that could speak in the ruins of God. He wanted to use this opportunity to understand the situation so he would not kill him for the time being. "That's right." Little Phoenix cried and said, "In order to protect our divine temple rainbow spiders, I had no choice but to move and hide here. So I understand what you mean. It seems like you want me to help you kill those giant strength fire apes, Yu Qianzhou said with a cold gaze. Tell me how many there are first. Little Phoenix wiped her tears and said, there aren't many and I don't want Mr. to help me kill them all. I only hope that Mr. can kill their leader the Ape King and I can handle the rest myself. I don't dare to trouble Mr. There's also an Ape King, so that's how it is. Yu Qianzhou nodded and suddenly asked, but our cultivation is about the same. Since you're not the Ape King's opponent, why do you think I can kill it? How high is the Ape King's cultivation? Little Phoenix explained impatiently, although the Ape King's cultivation has reached the early stage of Great Immortal, Mr. can control a divine item like the purple fire. Under the purple fire, how can it be Mr.'s opponent? It should be easy for Mr. to kill it. Since Madame Kaifeng is so confident, I can give it a try. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand towards the outside of the cave and said, then I'll trouble Madame to lead the way. I'll go meet that Ape King. He wasn't afraid of any danger because he could leave at any time. Instead, he wanted to take this opportunity to find someone to lead the way and find out more about the situation in the ruins of God. It would also be convenient for the people of Utopia to train here. Little Phoenix was stunned. She didn't expect him to agree so readily. Her eyes flickered and she couldn't help but hesitate. Yu Qianzhou immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, could it be that Madame suspects that I have ulterior motives? You should know that if I had any evil intentions towards you, I would have already attacked you. If Madame doesn't lead the way, then let's forget about this matter. I don't dare to wander around the ruins of God. Hearing this, Little Phoenix thought about it and realized that it made sense. If he really wanted to deal with her, there was no need for him to take such a big detour. He immediately smiled and said, Mister, what are you talking about? I just didn't expect Mister to be so straightforward. I'm a little overjoyed. Mister, there's no need to worry too much. Please follow me. With that, he flew out of the cave. Yu Qianzhou followed behind her with a cold smile on his face. He only believed 30% of her words at most. Even though she was crying and laughing at the same time, Yu Qianzhou still remembered the scene of her eating the spider egg with relish. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. This woman's thoughts were clear at a glance. How could he completely believe her? He was afraid that she had said so much just to kill him with a borrowed knife. Flying above the canyon, the two of them flew deeper into the ruins of God. With the thick fog covering his eyes, Yu Qianzhou didn't dare to fly too fast. He had been carefully watching his surroundings. After Kaifeng noticed this, he smiled and said, Mister, you don't have to worry too much. I'm very familiar with the situation in this area. Those who can threaten you and me in the ruins of God usually don't dare to appear here. Yu Qianzhou looked around and couldn't help but ask curiously, why is that? Could it be that there's some other reason? Mister might not know this, but there will always be someone in charge everywhere. The Divine Ruins realm is the same. Kaifeng sighed. The person in charge of the Divine Ruins realm is a Lion King who has cultivated for countless years. His cultivation has already reached the late stage of the Immortal Emperor realm. A long time ago, a golden-robed man with a very high cultivation came in from the outside and made a bet with the Lion King. In the end, the Lion King was defeated, so he fulfilled his promise of defeat and restricted all the experts in the ruins of God who had reached the immortal stage to not enter this sea of fog. And even more so, they were not allowed to take advantage of the opening of the ruins of God. There were also some even more excessive requirements that were really difficult to speak of, so I won't say it. Chapter 938. A golden-robed man who came from outside the Divine Ruins realm could defeat a late-stage immortal emperor expert? Yu Qianzhou didn't think too much about it. Who else could it be other than the immortal emperor Jin Tai? It was really strange. The rumored Jin Tai was heartless. Since he could defeat the #1 expert in the Divine Ruins realm, it was rare for him to not kill him. Looks like you are quite the courageous one. Others would not dare to step foot into this sea of mist, but you chose to stay inside, Yu Qianzhou said with a smile. He was more or less asking why. Why would I want to take such a big risk? I was really scared by the Ape King. In order to save my life, I could only take care of it for a while, so I took the risk to hide inside. Kaifeng shook her head and smiled bitterly. Didn't Mr. You notice? I hid under the canyon and almost didn't dare to take half a step out of the cave. I even had to hunt for food. I was afraid that others would discover me and spread the news to the Lion King's ears. This time I hope that Mr. can help me get rid of that evil Ape King and return my freedom. I will definitely repay you in the future. Although the distance between the two of them was very close, it was difficult to see the expression on each other's faces. Xianxia could not tell if what she said was true or false and directly replied, "Of course I am a man of my word. Since I have agreed, I will definitely do my best. Madam, don't worry." Kai Feng's face, which was separated by the thick fog, was filled with joy. She immediately promised solemnly, "This servant naturally trusts Mr. If this matter is successful, if Mr. has any orders in the future, Kai Feng will do his best." Hehe. Xianxia laughed. He had no intention of talking to her about those things that he didn't know if he would be able to fulfill in the future. He changed the topic. Didn't the Lion King restrict experts of the immortal stage or above? Why can't I see any fierce beasts in this sea of mist? Kai Feng immediately explained, "This has nothing to do with the Lion King's restrictions. The main reason is that the Divine Ruins realm opens once every 100 years. Right now it is not long before the Divine Ruin realm closes. The vicious beasts that were originally wandering in the fog and hunting for food have been killed by you guys from the outside. They are all hiding and do not dare to go in for the time being. After a little longer, after a few years, they will naturally charge in again." So that's how it is. Xianxia couldn't help but shake his head. It seemed humans were the fiercest, even fiercer than beasts. Although Kai Feng said that there was no danger in the fog, Xianxia was still vigilant of his surroundings, especially the woman beside him. He was tense on the inside but relaxed on the outside. The two of them talked and laughed along the way, and their relationship seemed to have begun to harmonize. As they talked and laughed, the scenery in front of them became brighter and brighter, giving people the feeling that they were flying into the light. Kai Feng reminded him, "We're about to get out of this sea of mist." As expected of a local who was familiar with the way. As soon as she finished speaking, their eyes suddenly lit up. The two of them instantly rushed out of the sea of mist, and a vast world appeared in front of Xianxia. After flying for a short distance, the two of them almost stopped in the air at the same time and looked around. The sun was shining, the mountains and rivers stretched endlessly, and the unknown ancient trees towered into the sky. It was full of vitality and there was no sign of danger. Kai Feng opened her arms and breathed in the fresh air to her heart's content. An expression of extreme enjoyment appeared on her face as she slightly moaned, "We're finally out again." Xianxia raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He turned back to look at the vast sea of mist behind him and asked, "Why is there such a large area of fog in the Divine Ruins realm? It feels a little abrupt. Could it be that someone set up some kind of formation?" Kai Feng opened her eyes and smiled, "I don't know. In any case, it existed a long time ago. With the opening of the Divine Ruins realm as the center, the surroundings are covered by a large area of thick fog. I think we're not too far from the Great Flaming Mountain." Xianxia waved his hand, indicating that they should continue on their way. He had no intention of wasting too much time here. Kai Feng immediately nodded with a smile. She naturally hoped to resolve the trouble as soon as possible, and the two of them quickly flew away. It did not take long before they arrived at a vast swamp. As Xianxia was wondering why there were no ferocious beasts in this place where ferocious beasts roamed, the white clouds above their heads suddenly surged. A strong and vicious wind covered their heads as a black silhouette suddenly pounced at them at a strange speed. Xianxia's pupils shrank slightly. He discovered that the one attacking them was actually a black eagle with a wingspan of more than 20 meters. He immediately teleported hundreds of meters away. However, the phoenix remained completely unflustered as it swung its arm through the air, and its entire arm transformed into a massive spider limb. Like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, it radiated faint golden light as it slashed through the air toward the oncoming falcon. The black eagle seemed to be taken aback. It quickly flapped its wings and tried to dodge. However, it was not faster than Kai Feng at all. A golden light pierced directly into its chest and abdomen without any effort. The black eagle flapped its wings and struggled, but its abdomen was directly cut open by Kai Feng's arm. A rain of blood burst out. Caw! With a sad cry in the sky, the black eagle suddenly fell into the swamp below. Xianxia was slightly shocked. This spider's limb was really sharp and vicious. His figure flashed and he chased after the falling eagle. He wanted to take this feathered beast's beast core. But at this moment, a beam of red light suddenly shot out from the swamp below like a cannonball, piercing through the giant eagle that was still alive from 400 to 500 meters away. Then the red light swept the giant eagle into a black hole that suddenly appeared in the swamp and engulfed it. The black hole was more than 20 meters long and wide. After swallowing the eagle, it quickly closed, followed by a thunderous gulping sound. What is this? Xianxia was shocked. He quickly stopped and soared into the sky. Following the gulping sound, the swamp quagmire began to move. Pairs of eyes the size of tabletops began to emerge from the mud and grass. Their red eyes were frighteningly huge. Then many more black holes opened up in the swamp. They were of different sizes, but they were all similar to the black hole that swallowed the eagle. They were all aimed at Xianxia like cannons. Ha! In the sky, the phoenix turned its sharp limbs back into arms. With a shake of its head, it turned back into the head of a ferocious spider. It fiercely spat out a tyrannical breath, covering the swamp below like a violent gale. The berserk aura swept across and the swamp below immediately became a mess. The black holes immediately closed up, and giant ugly toads that were 40 to 50 meters long jumped out of the swamp. There were also some that were only 10 meters long. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge toads appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge holes appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. Xianxia looked down with his mouth agape, and then looked at the huge toads that had disappeared into the distance. He was speechless. He never dreamed that there would be such a huge toad, and he couldn't help but stare blankly. The phoenix shook its head and returned to its original state. It flashed to Xianxia's side and said with a smile, "There are countless strange beasts in the ruins of God. They are called the heaven-drilling frog, and the curled tongue in their mouth is their sharp weapon for hunting. Don't underestimate their tongue, its penetrative power is abnormally strong. An adult heaven-drilling frog's tongue can instantly travel 1,000 meters and swallow its prey in one fell swoop. Normal prey's defense is very difficult to resist." Xianxia's gaze slowly retracted from the place where the toad had disappeared. He looked at the phoenix and said, looking at how Madame dealt with them as if they were light, "It's really admirable. She was able to scare this group of fierce beasts away with a single breath. It's really not simple. I suddenly thought of something." The phoenix was startled. "What is it?" "I was thinking if I help Madame kill that ape king, I wonder if Madame will become the overlord of this area?" Xianxia said with a teasing smile. "I believe that at that time, Madame will no longer have to hide in that ravine that doesn't see the light of day. Then Madame can run amok in this area with all kinds of prey at her fingertips. Most importantly, without their nemesis, they can safely reproduce the Temple Rainbow Spider bloodline. With the Temple Rainbow Spider's talent, I believe they can reproduce a huge population in the future. I wonder if my guess is correct?" The phoenix was immediately stunned. Xianxia's guess was right. Although her cultivation wasn't high, her talent was extraordinary, and it was difficult for her to find a natural enemy. She was second only to the giant fire ape king in this area. If the ape king died, then there would be no more opponents for her in this area, and she would become the overlord of this area. Without the nemesis of the ape king, not only would the Temple Rainbow Spiders be able to reproduce in peace, they would also become more and more powerful. This was because their ancestors came from the most mysterious divine phoenix temple in the divine ruin realm, and passed down some things that others didn't know about. As long as they were given certain conditions, they would become extremely powerful. A wise man doesn't lie in front of him. Mr. is roughly right. However, does Mr. think that it's not good for this servant to become the overlord of this area? With the relationship between this servant and Mr., is there any difference between this servant becoming the overlord of this area and Mr. becoming the overlord of this area? The phoenix said with a smile. The reason why she spoke so frankly was because Xianxia had guessed that she would use a borrowed knife to kill him, but he didn't expect that she would burn the bridge after crossing it. In fact, she already had a plan because her Temple Rainbow Spider bloodline was born with a hard and unbreakable carapace, and her claws and teeth were incomparably sharp. It was very rare for her to find a nemesis, so it was impossible for her to keep a natural enemy who could control the purple flames by her side. As long as Xianxia helped her get rid of the Ape King, she would have a foothold. At that time, she only needed to leak the news that there was a human in the ruins of God who could control the purple flames. Then there would naturally be experts who would come to take care of Xianxia. Her plan couldn't be said to be not meticulous, but Yu Qianzhou was originally a treacherous and ruthless person. It was fine if he didn't become suspicious, but once he became suspicious of someone, it would be very difficult to scheme against him. Therefore, after Yu Qianzhou heard her words, a trace of a playful smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he said, "Madam, I like what you said. However, madam, you won't do something like burning the bridge after crossing the river, right?"